The clang of steel on steel echoed along the walls of King's Landing on that fateful night, and Tyrion Lannister could smell the bitterness of wildfire lingering in the air. It was late, but the city was ablaze with tension. Bells tolled, men shouted, and somewhere in the distance, a warhorn brayed over the waters of Blackwater Bay. The heavy heat of summer pressed upon the populace with unrelenting force, stifling breath and making every movement feel like a chore. Yet, among the thousands of souls jammed behind the city's walls, only one death would change the course of the war and the history of the Seven Kingdoms forever. It was the night King Joffrey Baratheon, first of his name, died amidst the chaos of battle, and it was the night a new path unfurled beneath Westeros like a long, winding road of uncertainty and ambition. Darkness blanketed the Red Keep, interspersed with torches that sputtered in the fierce winds blowing off the bay. Tyrion paused on a high balcony overlooking the Blackwater, rivulets of sweat beading on his brow. From his vantage point, he saw the enemy ships creeping closer, and the green glow of wildfire flickered in the waves. He hated the stench that came from it, sharp as acid at the back of his throat, but he could not deny its terrifying beauty. Watching it churn in the water, he prayed that his plan, his meticulously set trap, would hold Stannis Baratheon at bay. If the day were won, King's Landing might yet be saved from destruction. If the day were lost, all would be consumed by the flames. Across the yard, he caught a glimpse of Ser Bronn of the Blackwater, who barked orders to a group of archers, each man's face showing a mixture of grim determination and raw fear. Tyrion drew a deep breath and let it out, trying to summon some measure of calm into his trembling hands. He had orchestrated the defenses of the city, yet everything still felt at the whim of the gods. Joffrey's shrill voice pierced the night. He was safe behind the walls, or so Tyrion thought, out of harm's way. But the Boy King had a habit of ignoring all good counsel. Tyrion trudged through the halls, boots scuffing the stone as the thunder of distant catapults rattled the windows. He had to ensure the king remained hidden, or at least well-guarded, because Joffrey's presence on the battlements was as useful as a babe's. Every time Joffrey tried to rouse the men, he only reminded them how petulant and cruel he was. Not the shining beacon a city under siege needed. Cersei Lannister had taken refuge in Maegor's Holdfast, deep in the heart of the Red Keep, with a small retinue of guards and ladies. That was the plan. If the city fell, perhaps she could barter for safety. Yet Tyrion doubted any mercy could be extracted from Stannis if he broke through. If Stannis won, the Lannisters and all their allies would be purged. Already, Tyrion had glimpsed panic in the eyes of the common folk who feared a massacre. War was never kind, no matter the victor. He found Joffrey near the drawbridge that led down to the gates, surrounded by the king's guard. The Boy King wore gilded armor, polished to a high sheen, looking more like a statue on display than a soldier. His short, blonde hair stuck out beneath his crown, and his pallid face was fixed in a scowl. Ser Marentrant and Ser Boros Blunt hovered behind him, loyal as dogs but twice as vicious. Joffrey's voice echoed in the courtyard, each word grating on Tyrion's ears. He was ordering some hapless soldier to the walls, demanding that the man prove his worth by firing flaming arrows onto the enemy fleet. The soldier wavered, eyes flickering with dread. Tyrion stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Your Grace," he said smoothly, "the men have their instructions." His voice held a forced calm. "We must let the wildfire do its work. The best place for you is behind the safety of these walls." Joffrey curled his lip in disdain. "You don't tell me where my place is, imp." That voice, shrill and dangerously close to cracking, set Tyrion's teeth on edge. Joffrey's sea-green eyes flicked to Tyrion's face, full of malice that belied his youth. The city needs to see their king defend them. Tyrion suppressed the urge to roll his eyes. He could smell the tang of sweat and fear on the men around them. Though they might cheer for Joffrey if forced, it was Tyrion's cunning that had done the most to fortify King's Landing. "I won't disagree that morale is important," he said, "but you must be mindful of your safety. The men will fight all the fiercer knowing their king lives." But Joffrey wasn't listening. His gaze roamed the battlements, the flickering lights, the swirl of chaos. Then he waved a dismissive hand at Tyrion, turning to address the knights behind him. "I want to see this battle from the ramparts," he said. "I want to watch Stannis burn." Tyrion clenched his jaw. He glanced at Ser Maren, who refused to meet his eyes. "Your Grace," Tyrion said in a low voice, stepping close, mindful of any who might eavesdrop, "you must not put yourself in harm's way. You are the crown. If you fall, the city falls with you." The Boy King laughed, a high, mocking sound. "Are you frightened for me, uncle? Or frightened for your precious hide?" Joffrey gave a cruel little smile. "Worry not. My King's Guard will keep me safe. They are sworn to do so at the cost of their own lives." Tyrion fumed in silence. He wanted to throttle the lad, but that was not an option. So he attempted another angle. If you insist, then at least let me accompany you. I have intelligence on our defenses that might be valuable if the situation changes quickly. A faint flicker of annoyance crossed Joffrey's face. He did not wish to share his moment of glory with the uncle he detested. Yet he wanted to prove himself before Tyrion too, or at least display some semblance of confidence. He gave the slightest of nods. Very well. But do not presume to lecture me on how to conduct a battle. I am the king. Tyrion bowed low, biting back a retort. As you say, your grace. And so they moved together, an uncomfortable retinue of Lannisters and Kingsguard heading up the stairs toward the city ramparts. Outside, the roar of battle was beginning in earnest, with flaming arrows arcing across the sky and the crash of ships that had sailed too far into the deadly trap. The walls were crowded with defenders, each man bracing for the onslaught. The stench of sweat, oil, and too many bodies assaulted Tyrion's senses. Fires began to dot the horizon, and the cries of men drifting up from the bay. Smoke, thick and suffocating, curled in the air. Tyrion's stomach churned as he thought of the innocent souls huddled inside the city, children who would have no inkling what awaited them if the defenses failed. He had done everything he could, spent hours upon hours with the Alchemists Guild, orchestrating the wildfire, ensuring they had a plan to funnel Stannis' ships into the kill zone. Still, the best-laid strategies often shattered against the chaos of real battle. Joffrey gripped the stone parapet, leaning forward to watch. His eyes glimmered with excitement. He seemed almost eager to see blood spill. In that moment, Tyrion was reminded that the boy was no more than a child playing at war, but a child with far too much power. Tyrion also noted the hush among the men who recognized the king's presence. They did not seem particularly heartened, but they kept their voices low and respectful. For a time, everything went according to Tyrion's plan. One of the enemy ships, the largest, drifted forward, covered in pitch and stuffed with wildfire. Bronn, from a hidden vantage point, launched a single flaming arrow that arced over the water, so small and insignificant that one might think it inconsequential. But when it fell upon the ship, it ignited a chain reaction that lit the bay in horrifying green flames. A monstrous explosion rocked the very foundations of the city walls, as though some ancient dragon had awoken beneath the waves and belched forth its fury. The sky glowed a sickly emerald, and heat rolled across the bay. Even from a distance, Tyrion felt his heart leap into his throat. He knew it was coming, but seeing it unleashed was another matter altogether. Men screamed on the ships, some plunged overboard, only to be consumed by the flames dancing on the water's surface. Others ran madly on deck before the fiery tide caught them. The defenders on the walls let out a great cheer, though it was tinged with horror at the carnage. The pyromancers had outdone themselves. Tyrion saw the green reflection in Joffrey's wide eyes, a savage glee twisting the king's lips. Yet Stannis was not deterred. Even as the wildfire took a heavy toll on his fleet, smaller craft managed to slip around the conflagration. The men who made it ashore began battering at the city gates or setting up ladders against the walls. Tyrion barked instructions to archers and crossbowmen. Hold until they're on the ladders, then shoot them down. Keep the pitch heated. Drop it on any who come too close. He scurried from one section of the wall to another, checking the defenses, ignoring the sneers from Joffrey and his retinue. The king, meanwhile, wandered too close to the edge, leaning over and yelling insults at the enemy. Stannis is a traitor. A usurper, he cried, voice carrying over the tumult. Men from below answered with curses and arrows, forcing the king's guard to raise their shields. An arrow pinged off Ser Marentrant's shield, nearly striking Joffrey in the face. The king recoiled with a startled oath, then turned to scream at the archer. Find that man and kill him. Tyrion bit his tongue. He had no illusions that Joffrey was helping. The best thing, indeed, would be for him to remain in the Red Keep, but the boy's presence was now a dangerous liability. The battle raged. Minutes felt like hours. The clangor of steel, the roar of flames, the screams of the dying converged into a single dreadful symphony. Tyrion's heart hammered in his chest as he rushed along the wall. He shouted directions, but the sheer chaos of the fight threatened to overwhelm him. More ladders rose along the battlements. Soon, the city's defenders found themselves in close combat with Stannis' vanguard. Tyrion himself ended up in a scuffle, ducking the swing of a sword from a man who had somehow mounted the wall. Before the foe could strike again, Podrick Payne, Tyrion's squire, put a spear through the man's back. Tyrion gave Pod a grateful nod, breath ragged. The city was holding for now. But it was in the swirl of this chaos that things took their fateful turn. The word spread among the defenders that the king was on the battlements, easily in range of enemy archers. Get the boy off the walls, roared men who recognized the threat. Ser Marentrant reached for Joffrey, who snarled back, unhand me. The boy king struggled, refusing to abandon his vantage. Then a horn sounded from somewhere in the city, the special signal that the hound Sandor Clegane had deserted, perhaps overcome by his fear of fire. Joffrey's eyes bulged with fury upon hearing of his sworn shield's withdrawal, and he nearly lost all sense, screaming curses. He wrenched free from Ser Meryn's grip and stumbled precariously along the wall. A cry went up and a flurry of arrows soared in from below. It happened too quickly. One arrow found its mark in Joffrey's leg, causing the boy to howl. Another whizzed past, grazing Ser Boros's helmet. Tyrion stood just a dozen paces away, eyes wide with horror. He and the Kingsguard rushed to shield the king, but in the next heartbeat more arrows came like a black swarm in the flickering torchlight. One struck Joffrey directly in the throat. His scream stopped. The boy looked down in shock, lips parted as blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. For a fraction of a second no one moved, as though time itself held its breath. Then Joffrey collapsed. His crown clattered on the stones, echoing in Tyrion's ears as if to emphasize the enormity of the moment. The boy king's eyes fluttered, panic and agony filling them, and then, in just a handful of heartbeats, his gaze went blank. Ser Boros lunged for him, but there was nothing to be done. The arrow had severed something vital. Blood poured onto the battlements, staining the polished armor that had once gleamed so proudly in the torchlight. All around them, gasps and screams broke out. Some men whispered, "The king is dead." Others roared in fury, surging forward to avenge him. But the chaos of battle had not ceased to grant them respite. Arrows and rocks kept pelting the wall. The wildfire still churned below, lighting the darkness with its emerald horror. Yet for Tyrion, the world narrowed to the sight of Joffrey's body, the slender limbs, the gilded armor, the golden hair matted with blood. He knelt by the corpse, heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. In that moment, everything felt suspended, like some strange hush had fallen over the battle, though in truth the city was as loud and furious as ever. Tyrion tried to speak, but no words formed. He had despised Joffrey, gods knew how many times he wished for the boy's comeuppance. But not like this. Not in the middle of a pitched battle. Not in front of thousands of onlookers with an arrow through the throat. Ser Meryn and Ser Boros each tried to lift the body, but they were in shock, trembling with a mixture of fury and fear. Boros, tears streaming down his face, snatched the crown from the ground. But the golden circlet had been bent askew by an iron arrowhead. Tyrion gently laid his hand on the bloodied armor, his mind racing. He could sense the quake that was about to shake King's Landing and the entire realm. Joffrey Baratheon was dead, and with him the immediate heir of House Lannister on the Iron Throne. In the swirl of his thoughts, Tyrion realized how precarious their position was. Cersei would be undone by grief. Tywin, if he found out during the midst of the siege, might break. The legitimacy of the crown was now in question. The city might still fall or tear itself apart in the shock of losing its king. And none of that changed the immediate problem. Stannis' army was still hammering at their gates. "Get him inside," Tyrion snapped, his voice cracking. The Kingsguard obeyed, hoisting the body as gently as they could. Blood slicked the stones where Joffrey had fallen. Tyrion knew it would soon be washed away by the downpour of water and pitch they used to repel the assault, but the memory would not fade so quickly. The impetus to fight wavered among the defenders. They no longer had the figurehead who had demanded their loyalty. But Tyrion, ignoring the hammering of his own heart, seized the moment. He had to maintain order, or everything would collapse. Wiping sweat and grime from his face, he rose to his feet and faced the men on the battlements. "King or no king," he bellowed, "Stannis will show no mercy if he takes the city. Hold your lines. Hold them, or die with a traitor's noose around your neck." Something in his voice penetrated their shock, and the men rallied. For a brief moment, Tyrion felt a surge of what might have been pride or mania. He had no illusions that they fought for him or for the memory of Joffrey. They fought for their own lives. But if that was enough to keep them going, Tyrion would not squander it. Meanwhile, the Kingsguard bore Joffrey's body back toward the Red Keep. Word would spread through the city in moments, carried by terrified tongues. Tyrion barked a final order for archers to keep firing, then turned on his heel to follow. He stumbled down the twisting stair where frightened onlookers parted before him. The swirl of his cloak, the glimmer of torchlight on the stone walls, he felt in a fever dream. This changed everything. Yet the battle still raged, and he had no time for grief or reflection. He reached the courtyard where a cluster of Lannister guards had gathered in frantic discussion. At the sight of Tyrion, they quieted, eyes darting behind him as if searching for the king. Tyrion addressed them, voice firm despite the quake he felt inside. "Joffrey is gone. The city still stands. We will protect it. Have more archers move to the southern ramparts. If the men lose hope, we lose the city." One of them, a captain, stammered, "My lord, what of Queen Cersei?" Tyrion drew a sharp breath. "She should be told, but not yet. We cannot afford her hysteria. I will go to her myself as soon as possible." He dreaded that meeting more than anything. The captain saluted and hurried off, and Tyrion half ran toward Maegor's holdfast. In the distance, he heard the telltale booms of more wildfire casks detonating. The night sky glowed in infernal green. Over the walls, Stannis' men would be pushing their assault. If they realized the king was dead, morale among the defenders might crack. And if the defenders broke, the city was lost. Tyrion's short legs pumped furiously, and he bit back curses each time a stray arrow whistled overhead or when the ground rumbled from a distant explosion. At last, he reached the entrance to the holdfast where gold-cloaked guards barred the way. They recognized him at once and let him pass, but Tyrion paused to give them instructions: "Let no one in or out save the king's guard. If the city falls, you'll know it soon enough." He slipped inside. The corridor was dimly lit, torch flames flickering across bare stone. He heard a faint sobbing sound from somewhere deeper within. No doubt the queen's ladies were terrified, but they had no inkling of the fresh horror that had just befallen them. Tyrion found the grand hall where Cersei had set up a kind of waiting area, a bizarre mimicry of court, with casks of wine and a smattering of court ladies. They looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. Cersei herself sat near the dais, a goblet in hand. She was pale, her hair disheveled, though she tried to project an air of control. Ser Island Payne loomed in a corner, silent as though waiting for any command from the queen. She caught sight of Tyrion, and a flicker of relief passed over her features, quickly followed by suspicion. "Tyrion," she said, her voice crisp. "What news? Is my son?" She broke off, perhaps sensing something amiss. Tyrion swallowed, suddenly aware that the entire room was watching. He met Cersei's gaze, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. "There is no gentle way to tell you," he said quietly, "so I'll speak it plainly. Joffrey is dead." A gasp rippled across the ladies in waiting. One shrieked and sank to her knees. The rest began to chatter in panic, horror etching their faces. But all Tyrion saw was Cersei, her eyes locked on his. For a fraction of a heartbeat, she was utterly still, as if turned to stone. Then she sprang up, the goblet clattering to the floor, red wine splashing across the rushes. "Lies," she spat. This is some vile trick. Where is he? Where is my son?" Her voice trembled with rage and fear. Tears glinted in her eyes. Never had Tyrion seen her so raw. He took a slow step forward, mindful that Ser Island hovered like a vulture. "I watched it happen," Tyrion said. An arrow, the attack on the ramparts. He forced himself to remain calm, but his voice shook. It was swift. He did not suffer long. She stared at him, her lips curling back in anguish, and then she let out a ragged scream. Ser Island tensed, uncertain if he should intervene. Tyrion approached, ignoring the impulse to step back from her fury. "Cersei," he began quietly, "I grieve with you, but we must keep our heads. The battle is not over." She rounded on him, eyes ablaze. "You," she hissed, spittle flying. "You were supposed to keep him safe. You told me the city was impregnable, that he would be unharmed." Tyrion felt a surge of guilt and anger. He had tried. He refused to stay hidden, and you know his nature, Tyrion replied, voice clipped but gentle. "We can blame each other all we like, or we can act. Right now, the men must not lose heart. We must hold King's Landing until Tywin arrives, or we're all lost." Her eyes flicked across the hall, noticing the frightened stares of her ladies. She swallowed, trying to compose herself, but tears streaked her cheeks. "All lost," she echoed, voice trembling. "Joffrey, my son." She looked at Tyrion again, searching his face. Then her rage flared anew. "Tommen," she said abruptly. "He's next in line. We must protect Tommen at all costs." Tyrion blinked, hardly believing they were already speaking of succession. But that was the brutal reality of royal life. We need to crown him, or at least keep him safe from the chaos. If Stannis learns Joffrey is dead, it could embolden him further. "Where's Tommen?" "He's in his chambers," Cersei said. "Under guard." She looked away, blinking back tears. Then she stiffened her spine and squared her shoulders. "They will pay for this," she said under her breath, and Tyrion knew she meant the entire world. She would blame the archers, the defenders, Stannis, Tyrion, the gods themselves. The queen was in pain, and her vengeance would be terrible. "Gather yourself," Tyrion murmured, aware that time was slipping away. "For Tommen's sake. For everyone's sake. If we do not hold the city tonight, the boy will not live to see a sunrise as king." She bit her lip, fighting to maintain composure, and then nodded, turning to the others in the hall. "Leave us," she snapped. Her ladies scurried out, weeping and bowing. Ser Island remained, a sentinel of death. After a moment's hesitation, Cersei allowed him to stay. "What do we do now?" she demanded of Tyrion in a hushed voice. Tyrion let out a slow breath. "We hold," he said simply. "We fight until our last arrow, until our last man. If we can break Stannis' spirit, or at least hold him off until Tywin's forces arrive, we survive. Once dawn breaks, if the city still stands, we proclaim Tommen as king." He paused, swallowing. "That is, if we live to see dawn." She pressed her hands to her face, and Tyrion saw them shaking. She took a moment, then looked up, eyes full of cold resolve. "Then do it," she hissed. "Win this battle, or we all die." She turned away, heading for the door that would lead to Tommen's chambers. "I'll see to my son. Stop Stannis, or we lose everything." Tyrion nodded, suddenly tired beyond measure. The queen vanished, and he was left with the knowledge that half the city might be in flames and the other half in panic. The next hours would decide the fate of the realm. He left the holdfast, a swirl of night air hitting him as he stepped back into the courtyard. The sky was still lit by flickering fires. The walls trembled with the continued assault. He heard the distant cries of men. Some illusions or hopes that Joffrey's presence might have lent the defenders courage were now moot. And yet, ironically, with Joffrey's death, the city's chances might improve. No more distractions, no more reckless commands. The men might even fight better without a petty tyrant screaming at them. Tyrion pushed that dark thought aside, focusing on the immediate crisis. He returned to the ramparts, and although men parted for him, some refusing to look him in the eye, he saw they still stood firm. The wildfire had ravaged a good portion of Stannis' fleet, but there were enough ground forces pressing forward to threaten a breach. Tyrion peered over the edge of the wall. Bodies lay strewn across the patch of ground where the ladders had been raised. Broken wood, battered shields, and spilled guts glistened in the light of burning pitch. It was a night to break men's souls, yet the defenders still clung to the walls, determined. Tyrion spied Ser Balon's swan hacking away at a pair of enemy soldiers who had managed to crest the battlements. Not far away, Lancel Lannister was barking orders despite a bloody wound on his arm. Tyrion hurried to him, calling, "What news, cousin?" Lancel turned, face drawn. "They're focusing their attack on the Mudgate," he said. "I've sent men to shore it up, but Stannis has brought rams. We're trying to burn them, but archers are picking us off." Tyrion felt a sinking in his gut. "We can't allow them to break that gate. If they pour through there, it'll be a slaughter." Lancel winced, pressing a hand to his wound. Blood seeped between his fingers. "We need more men, but they're scattered." Tyrion scanned the chaos, mind racing. "Rally the gold cloaks from the western walls. Stannis doesn't seem to be pressing too hard there. Shift them to the Mudgate. And if we still have reserves near the Red Keep, bring them out now." But the king, Lancel began, but then faltered as though recalling that Joffrey was no longer among them. "And the queen?" Tyrion forced a grim expression. "The queen's instructions are to protect Tommen. We do that by stopping Stannis." He fixed Lancel with a hard look. "See it done." The young knight nodded, summoning what remained of his courage, and staggered off to carry out Tyrion's command. Tyrion turned to Podrick, who hovered uncertainly at his side. "Go with him," Tyrion said. "Make sure the orders are clear. Then return to me. I'll be at the Mudgate shortly." Pod's wide eyes darted between the carnage in the distance and Tyrion's face. But he simply nodded, bowed, and took off after Lancel. Tyrion stood there, feeling alone, even with hundreds of men fighting around him. The city quaked under the fury of battle. He tried to summon some scrap of courage, thinking of Shay, hidden away somewhere in the city, or Sansa, locked in her rooms, or even that child king, Tommen, who was now the realm's new focus. The burdens were immense, but Tyrion reminded himself that fear was a demon to be mastered. He hurried toward the Mudgate, which was on the southwestern edge near the river. The closer he got, the thicker the fighting. Smoke choked the alleys, and he had to navigate around piles of rubble from collapsed buildings. Archers stationed on rooftops fired down at the enemy, while crossbowmen on the walls tried to pick off anyone approaching the gate. The gatehouse itself trembled under the pounding of Stannis' battering rams. Tyrion saw splinters raining down from the enormous wooden doors each time the metal-shod ram struck. If that gate fell, the floodgates would open and Stannis' men would spill into the city. "Hold them!" Tyrion roared, pushing his way forward, brandishing a short sword he had taken off a dead man. "Archers on the flanks! Pour flame down on that ram." A few men recognized him and obeyed, firing arrows coated with pitch toward the group struggling to break the gate. Screams rose as the flaming shafts found their targets. But more men surged forward, discipline strong even under the scorching fires. Tyrion realized how resolute Stannis' forces were. They believed their cause just, and that conviction made them terrifying foes. As he tried to rally the defenders, a roar went up and the gate shuddered. A portion of the wooden planks gave way. Hands reached through, ripping at splinters. The next blow might tear the doors fully from their hinges. Tyrion gritted his teeth and saw Lancel's men arrive, hastily forming a shield wall in front of the cracked gate. Spears at the ready, bellowed Lancel, though he looked pale from blood loss. Tyrion joined them, heedless of rank, standing behind the shield line. With a resounding crash, the gate finally succumbed, splintering outward as the ram was hauled back. Stannis's men, howling their war cries, rushed forward into the breach. They slammed into the shield wall like a tidal wave, steel clashing, men screaming as they were skewered or cut down. Tyrion found himself in the thick of it, ducking blows from swords lashing out with his short blade. He was no warrior, but desperation lent him strength. He thrust at a man's exposed thigh, feeling the jarring impact as the steel bit flesh. The man went down, shrieking. Tyrion stumbled over another corpse, nearly losing his balance. Chaos reigned. The shield wall began to buckle under the sheer force of numbers. Lancel roared again, urging the men to hold, but an axe cleaved into his shoulder, spraying blood. He dropped to his knees with a groan. Another blow would have finished him, but Podrick Payne, returned just in time, lunged in with his spear, dispatching Lancel's attacker. Tyrion saw Lancel's eyes roll back and men dragged him away from the melee. The line threatened to collapse entirely. Gritting his teeth, Tyrion plunged forward, hacking at a man who wore a stag sigil on his breast. The soldier tried to drive a sword into Tyrion's gut. Tyrion twisted aside just in time, the blade scraping his armor. Another blow from a second man caught Tyrion's arm, slicing through fabric. Pain flared hot and blood trickled down his sleeve, but the cut was shallow. Podrick was at his side again, thrusting with dogged determination. For a moment, they forced the attackers back. Another wave crashed into them and the line wavered anew. Tyrion heard a horn. For one mad instant, he thought it signaled a retreat, that the city had finally broken. But this horn was deeper, louder, coming from outside the city. It was accompanied by shouting. The men around him paused in confusion. The host that battered the gatehouse seemed unsettled as well. Then Tyrion recognized the heraldic calls that sometimes preceded the arrival of reinforcements. He prayed to the gods that this was Tywin or some savior because they had precious little time left. Moments later, he heard horses' hooves thundering on the ground beyond the gate. The defenders on the walls shouted that cavalry was riding in from the north side of the city. Tyrion risked a glance through the battered gate and saw banners waving in the torchlit distance. Among them, he spied the Golden Lion of House Lannister, but also the Golden Rose of House Tyrell. Relief and confusion warred within him. Had his father truly forged an alliance with Highgarden? If so, that alliance would be their salvation this night. Stannis's men, confronted with a sudden cavalry charge to their rear, began to waver. The battered defenders in the gateway seized the opportunity. They rallied with furious desperation, pushing back. Tyrion sensed the shift in momentum. He let out a ragged cry of encouragement, and the men around him pressed forward, cutting down or driving off those who had ventured through the breach. Gradually, the immediate danger receded. Through the swirling smoke and flames, cavalry poured in from the outside, slamming into Stannis's besieging forces. Unprepared for an attack on two fronts, they broke. Some still fought fiercely, but many began to flee toward the river. Tyrion felt a disorienting blend of triumph and exhaustion. The city was not taken. Not yet. And with Tywin's arrival, assuming it was Tywin leading the charge, they might actually push Stannis away from the walls. A group of horsemen galloped through the ruined gatehouse, almost trampling the corpses that littered the ground. Tyrion ducked to avoid being struck by a horse's flank. He recognized the banners, the Lion of Lannister and the Rose of Tyrell. Two knights dismounted, scanning the scene. One was Ser Kevan Lannister, Tyrion's uncle. The other bore the sigil of House Tyrell, a man with a broad chest and a thick brown beard. Tyrion struggled to remember the name, Ser Alistair or Ser Leo, perhaps. It hardly mattered. Kevan rushed to Tyrion's side, pressing a gauntlet hand to his nephew's shoulder. "The gods be good, you're alive." Tyrion let out a breathless laugh. "Thanks to you, uncle. We were at the breaking point." Kevan's face was grim, though relief flickered in his eyes. "We came as soon as your father got word. Mace Tyrell's forces joined with ours. We thought to catch Stannis unawares, and it seems we did." "The city." Tyrion pointed toward the city proper, chest heaving. Wildfire took out half of Stannis's fleet, but they nearly stormed the walls. "Joffrey is," he broke off, swallowing hard, realizing how momentous those next words were. "He's dead." Kevan's face fell. "Dead?" He looked away, anguish warring with disbelief. But he was a trained soldier, and he recovered quickly. "We must secure Tommen, then." His gaze flicked over the wounded men around them, the battered defenders. "Where's your father?" I'm not certain," Tyrion said. likely leading another group of reinforcements outside the walls, smashing what remains of Stannis' lines. He nodded toward the distant battlefield. We should keep pressing to drive them away from the gates entirely. If they regroup, we'll be in trouble. Kevin agreed, waving to the cavalry and foot soldiers behind him. Secure the gatehouse. Reform the line. Push Stannis' men back to the river. The battered defenders mustered what they could, buoyed by the arrival of fresh forces. Tyrion could hardly believe their fortune. An hour ago, it seemed all would be lost, and now victory was tantalizingly within reach. Podrick appeared at Tyrion's side, panting, blood splattered on his face. "My lord," he gasped, "Ser Lancel's been taken to the maesters. He may yet live." There was relief in Pod's eyes, though he trembled from the shock of battle. Tyrion managed a nod. "Good. He fought bravely." He wiped sweat from his brow and gazed across the ruins of the gate. "We need to ensure the city is stable. Joffrey's death will cause panic, especially among the Lannister men." Kevin overheard, face set in determination. "We'll quell any riots or confusion. The gold cloaks must keep order." He leveled his gaze at Tyrion, voice low. "This is a heavy blow, but we must announce Tommen's ascension soon, lest the city crumble into anarchy." Tyrion pressed his lips together. "Yes. But first, let's end this battle properly. We should confirm that Stannis is truly in retreat." He looked out across the bay where fires still danced on the water's surface. Gods, what a night! They reorganized quickly. Kevin remained to direct men at the mud gate, while Tyrion took a small force up to the battlements to coordinate with archers. The rest of the night was a blur of desperate fighting, but with Tywin and the Tyrell host bearing down on Stannis' flank, the tide had well and truly turned. Another wave of wildfire was unleashed farther out, discouraging any renewed naval approach. More horns sounded, some Lannister, some Tyrell, some from Stannis' forces signaling retreat. Stannis himself, rumor said, tried to rally his troops even as they were slaughtered on both sides. But eventually he was forced to withdraw, dragging what was left of his host back onto the remnants of his ships. By the time the sky lightened to a pale gray, only pockets of enemy soldiers remained, surrounded and surrendering. King's Landing had not fallen. Yet victory felt hollow to Tyrion as he stood on a section of the wall that overlooked the bay. Bodies floated amid the debris of burnt ships, the green glow of wildfire still flickering here and there. The stench of charred flesh and smoke was overwhelming. He leaned on the parapet, letting the breeze cool his sweaty face. The city had been saved, but at a terrible cost. And the Lannisters had lost their king, a boy who had worn the crown no matter his cruelty. The ramifications would be vast. Would the Tyrells still support them if the new king was so young? Would the common folk riot? Or would they prefer Tommen, whose nature was gentler than Joffrey's? Tyrion suspected Tommen might prove a far better king, if only he survived the ensuing power struggles. Kevin approached from behind, removing his helm. "Tyrion," he said, voice quiet, "we've routed the last of Stannis' men from the docks. The battle is done." Tyrion nodded, eyes drifting to the slowly rising sun. The dawn was stained with smoke, turning the sky a dull orange. "I'm not sure if I should be thankful or sick at the sight of it," he murmured. Kevin's expression softened. "We'd all best give thanks we're still alive. Come, let's find your father and see how we'll handle the city." He paused. "We'll have to deal with your sister soon as well." Tyrion sighed, exhaustion dragging at his bones. "Cersei will be in a frenzy, demanding vengeance and power. She'll want Tommen crowned at once." He turned from the bay. "I'll go to her, see how the queen fares. Will you gather the lords who've come to our aid and meet in the throne room in an hour? We must show a unified front to the people." Kevin agreed, clasping Tyrion's shoulder briefly before leaving. Tyrion lingered, letting the breeze wash over him. His arm throbbed where he'd been cut, and he felt the sticky wetness of blood. That would need attention from a maester soon enough. But for now he would endure. There were more pressing matters than his discomfort. He descended from the walls, weaving through the courtyard, stepping over the detritus of battle. Shattered shields, broken swords, bodies of Lannister men and Stannis' men alike. Some he recognized, some he did not. A few moaned in pain. He stopped to give what comfort he could, ordering the gold cloaks to gather the wounded. Everywhere, men slumped in exhaustion, too tired even to cheer their victory. As Tyrion passed the gate leading into the Red Keep's inner wards, he caught sight of Sansa Stark. She stood near a cluster of ladies, all pale-faced and trembling, as if they'd ventured out to see if the city still stood. Her eyes fell on Tyrion, and for a moment, their gazes locked. He saw relief in her expression, but also a haunted sorrow. Joffrey's death would change many things for her, for better or worse. He gave her a small nod, uncertain how to address her. She bowed her head, hands clasped. They shared a silent understanding of the chaos that had swept through the city. Sansa turned and fled back into the Red Keep's corridors. He continued on, pushing open the heavy doors to Maegor's Holdfast. There, outside the Queen's chambers, he found a handful of Kingsguard, their white cloaks stained with soot and blood. Ser Meryn Trant had a bandage wrapped around his arm, and Ser Boros Blunt held a vacant expression. Neither looked at Tyrion when he approached, but they didn't bar his entry. He pushed the door open and stepped into the antechamber. In the dim light, he saw Cersei standing before a window, staring out at the city. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her lips were set in a thin line. Nearby, Tommen sat on a cushioned chair, his face streaked with tears. He was trembling, the weight of the crown about to crush him before it was even placed on his head. At the sound of Tyrion's footsteps, Cersei turned, her eyes red. "We held the city," she said, voice devoid of emotion. "Stannis is gone." It was not a question, merely a statement. News traveled fast. Tyrion nodded wearily. "Yes, the day is ours, if you can call such slaughter a victory." She flicked her gaze to Tommen, who clutched a scrap of cloth in his hands, eyes wide with fear. Then she advanced on Tyrion, her voice dropping to a hiss. "My son is dead, my firstborn, and you are standing here alive. It should have been you, imp." He felt the sting of her words, though he had expected no less. "If it could bring Joffrey back, I'd gladly give my life," he murmured, unsure if it was entirely true but knowing it was the right response. She let out a bitter laugh. Such a lie, but a pretty one. Tears welled again, and she clenched her jaw. "I've lost him. The crown must pass to Tommen now, but he's a child. My father will rule. Or you will manipulate him from behind the throne. My boy's fate is sealed, just like Joffrey's." Tyrion forced himself to remain composed, though the guilt gnawed at him. "Tommen has you," he said, gesturing gently, "and he will have the support of the Lannister-Tyrell alliance if that alliance still holds. We must crown him swiftly to maintain stability." Cersei closed her eyes, pressing a hand to her temple. The rage that had driven her seemed to be draining away, replaced by a grief so profound it hollowed her out. "Very well," she whispered. "Do what you must." Tommen raised his tear-streaked face. "Mother," he said in a quavering voice. Do I really have to be king now?" She rushed to him, gathering him in her arms. "You are the king," she said softly, though her voice trembled. "You must be strong. For Joffrey." She swallowed, unable to continue. Tyrion watched them, feeling a pang of sympathy for the boy who had lost a brother and now had a crown thrust upon him. He knew Tommen was mild-tempered, kind-hearted, a gentle soul in a family of vipers. Would that gentleness survive the intrigues of court? He cleared his throat softly. "We will hold a council in 1 hour in the throne room," he said to Cersei. "The lords and knights who saved the city will be there, and we will make the announcement. It need not be the grandest of coronations, but the people must see Tommen as king. For their sake as much as ours." Cersei said nothing, merely bowed her head over Tommen's. Tyrion took that as assent. He turned to leave but paused at the threshold. "I am truly sorry, Cersei," he said, his tone sincere. "For everything." She did not respond, nor did she meet his eyes. Her silence spoke volumes. Tyrion left them to their grief. He found a maester in a nearby corridor who tended to his arm, applying a salve and wrapping it tightly in clean linen. Tyrion winced as the wound stung, but the pain was bearable. The maester advised him to rest, but Tyrion merely gave a tired laugh. There was no rest for him yet. He needed to speak with his father, confirm the next steps, ensure that House Tyrell did not waver now that Joffrey was gone. Weary footsteps carried him to the throne room. Along the way, he saw that servants and soldiers alike were working feverishly to clean away signs of the night's battle. Bodies were removed, rubble cleared, and the stench of smoke hung about everything. A hush had settled over the city, a mixture of relief and sorrow, as if King's Landing was exhaling after holding its breath all night. When Tyrion finally reached the throne room, he found Tywin Lannister already there, conferring with a handful of knights and lords. The tall doors had been thrown wide to allow fresh air inside, and streaks of morning sunlight slanted through the high windows. Tywin stood near the Iron Throne, still clad in partial armor, his green eyes cold with calculation. Seeing his father, Tyrion paused, uncertain how to approach. But Tywin waved him forward. "It seems we arrived just in time," Tywin said, voice cool. Stannis was on the verge of taking the city. His gaze flicked over Tyrion, noting the bandaged arm and the exhaustion that no doubt lined his features. "You did well, holding it as long as you did." Tyrion felt a glimmer of unexpected gratification at that rare compliment. "We lost many, but we saved King's Landing from a sack," he replied. "There is more, father. Joffrey is gone." Tywin's jaw tightened, and for a moment Tyrion saw real grief flash across his face. Despite everything, Joffrey had been the recognized heir to the throne, a Lannister in all but name. Tywin closed his eyes, controlling himself swiftly. "Then Tommen will be crowned," he said, voice firm. "We must ensure a smooth succession." Tyrion suppressed a wave of relief that his father understood the urgency. "Yes. Immediately." Mace Tyrell strode up, a large man with a florid face, wearing golden armor polished to a mirror sheen. He gave Tywin a respectful bow. Behind him were several Tyrell bannermen. "My lord," Mace said, "we have triumphed. Once the city is secure, we must deal with the aftermath. Shall we proclaim the new king at once?" Tywin inclined his head. "We shall. Joffrey's death is a tragedy, but the realm cannot be left leaderless. Tommen will be crowned within the hour, a small ceremony to be repeated more grandly when conditions allow. Your presence, Lord Tyrell, will be invaluable in showing a united front." Mace Tyrell's eyes flicked between Tywin and Tyrion. "And my daughter, Margaery, was betrothed to the king. Now that Joffrey is," he hesitated, "gone, does the betrothal pass to his successor?" Tyrion stiffened. It felt callous to think of marriages so soon after a bloody siege. But that was the nature of politics. Tywin answered smoothly, "That is a matter we must discuss. Tommen is younger, but he is king now. A union with House Tyrell remains vital." Mace nodded slowly, his expression resolute. "We remain loyal. We did not come here for one day's battle only. If it pleases your lordship and her grace, then let us proceed." Tyrion could not help thinking that Margaery Tyrell might find Tommen's gentler temperament more agreeable than Joffrey's sadism. Perhaps, in a grim twist of fate, this was better for her. He swallowed that thought, focusing on the immediate necessity, giving the city a sense of stability. The knights and lords who had participated in the battle filtered in, many leaning on each other for support, sporting fresh bandages or singed armor. They formed a rough circle around the throne. The Iron Throne itself loomed there, forged of 1,000 swords. Tyrion stared at it, remembering how Joffrey had once reclined so arrogantly upon its jagged edges. Now that seat awaited a younger, more innocent occupant. Tyrion was not sure how he felt about that. Trumpets sounded, though weakly, for the city's musicians were exhausted and some instruments lost in the chaos. The doors swung open to admit Queen Cersei, her face a pale mask of composure. She held Tommen's hand, guiding him forward. The boy stared wide-eyed at the throng of lords and knights, swallowing nervously. His steps faltered when he neared the dais, looking up at the towering Iron Throne. For a moment he hesitated, fear etched on his features. Then, at Cersei's gentle urging, he ascended the steps. A hush fell. The hall was not crowded, only those essential to secure the moment. But the gravity of the occasion was palpable. A high septon, borrowed from his cloister after the previous one had met an unfortunate end, stepped forward, wringing his hands. He cleared his throat. "We gather here, on this day, to crown Tommen of the House Baratheon, first of his name." Tyrion saw a flicker cross Cersei's face at the mention of House Baratheon. The fiction of the boy's parentage was a necessity for the throne, but it stung all the same, reminding her of the secrets that had loomed over Joffrey's life as well. The ceremony was brief. There was no time for pomp or pageantry. A battered crown was produced, not the one Joffrey had worn, too stained with blood. This was a simpler circlet, presumably taken from the royal treasury. The high septon placed it upon Tommen's head. The boy flinched slightly at the weight, glancing toward his mother. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, but said nothing. Applause broke out, though it was subdued, more an acknowledgement of necessity than a joyful acclamation. Tommen stood up straighter, looking out over those assembled. His voice trembled as he spoke. I will do my duty, to the realm, to the people, and to the Seven." His small hands gripped the arms of the Iron Throne. I vow to protect you all, to ensure peace, and to be a good king." Tyrion felt a strange mix of hope and pity. The boy truly meant those words, or so it seemed. If only the Game of Thrones did not grind such innocence into dust. Cersei placed a hand on Tommen's shoulder and, without ceremony, declared that the crown recognized those who had defended the city. Then she gestured for Tywin to approach. Tywin Lannister strode forward, bowing. Tommen looked down at his grandfather with awe, for Tywin had just saved them from utter ruin. Tywin, for his part, spoke in a measured tone, offering fealty to King Tommen on behalf of the Lannisters and praising House Tyrell's valor in battle. Mace Tyrell then stepped up, bowing low and reaffirming his loyalty. There was no mention of Joffrey's betrothal, though it hovered in the air. Tyrion wondered when they'd broach that publicly. As the formalities continued, Tyrion's mind drifted to the tasks ahead. The city was wounded. Entire districts had burned, and looters might rove unchecked if order wasn't restored. The navy was in shambles, the gold cloaks battered. And beyond the city, the War of the Five Kings raged on. Robb Stark was still in the field, though rumors suggested his fortunes had taken a turn. Balon Greyjoy threatened the coasts. Renly was dead, but now Stannis had fled, not necessarily defeated for good. The realm was hardly at peace, and now they had a young boy on the throne. Tyrion wondered whether it would have been better if they had simply lost. No, he thought. That road led to more blood. He had no love for Joffrey, but he saw no benefit in the city's ruin. When the speeches ended, Tommen rose, the crown slightly askew on his head. Cersei guided him gently from the throne, down the dais. The lords parted to allow them passage. Ser Boros and Ser Meryn flanked them, pale and grim. Tywin followed, and Mace Tyrell with his entourage. A hush fell again as they left the hall. Tyrion lingered behind, letting the others file out. He stepped up to the Iron Throne, running his hand over one of the twisted swords. The cold metal pressed against his palm. He recalled how Joffrey once boasted of its power. Now Joffrey's blood was spilled, an echo of the many who had died in pursuit of this seat. Savoring the moment, "My lord," a voice said from behind him. It was Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, who slipped from the shadows. He wore a small smile, as if all of this amused him. It's not every day that a new king is crowned, after all. Emperor Joffrey, gone so soon. Tyrion straightened, putting on his most neutral expression. "You waste no time returning to courtly intrigues, Lord Baelish. Time is a precious commodity, especially now," Littlefinger replied. "I merely sought to see who remains standing after last night's excitement. Imagine my delight that you still draw breath." Tyrion decided not to rise to the bait. "One might say the same of you. But if you'll excuse me, I've duties to attend." Littlefinger gave him a mock bow. "Of course, Lord Tyrion. May the new king rule wisely, and may we all prosper." With that, he pivoted and glided out of the hall. Tyrion shook his head, wondering how men like Littlefinger managed to profit from every upheaval. The city was far from stable, and the vacuum left by Joffrey's death would invite opportunists aplenty. Tyrion exhaled. He had to remain vigilant, though exhaustion weighed on his every step. He left the throne room, heading into the corridors. Already, the Red Keep buzzed with uneasy activity. Servants scurried about, trying to tidy the chaos while coping with broken windows, smashed doors, and wounded soldiers. Tyrion paused by a small courtyard where a fountain gurgled. He spied Bronn leaning against a pillar, arms crossed, splattered in soot. The Sellsword nodded curtly at Tyrion. "Thought you were a goner for sure," Bronn said, a half-smile on his lips. "But you're a tough little bastard." "Good to see." Tyrion let out a soft laugh. "Likewise, Bronn. Without your aim, half of Stannis' fleet wouldn't have gone up in flames. You've earned your pay and more." Bronn shrugged. "Pay's nice, but living to spend it is nicer. Now that we're not all about to be butchered, maybe I'll find a tavern and a woman to help me forget the things I've seen." Tyrion couldn't argue with that sentiment. "You're welcome to it once you've rested. But stay close. I suspect we'll need your talents more than ever in the days to come." Bronn snorted. Always more trouble. Call me when you need me." He sauntered off, leaving Tyrion alone in the courtyard. The hours that followed were a relentless blur of logistics and triage. Tyrion organized patrols to quell any looting, instructed the gold cloaks to maintain a curfew, and had the city's gates secured. He received reports from the maesters about the wounded. Countless men lay dying in the Great Hall, which had been hastily converted into a field hospital. Tyrion felt a pang of remorse that so many men had lost their lives to defend a boy king who was now dead. The cost was staggering. By midday, the worst of the fires had been extinguished, though smoke still curled above smoldering ruins. Occasional collapses of weakened structures sent plumes of dust into the sky. The populace, terrified yet relieved, stumbled into the streets to survey the damage. A measure of calm was returning, but tension remained high. Cersei had retired with Tommen, refusing visitors. Tywin presided over several councils, ensuring that the Tyrell alliance was secure, negotiating new terms that likely included Marjorie's betrothal to Tommen. Tyrion was invited to some of these discussions, but not all. Tywin still regarded him with a mixture of grudging respect and paternal disdain. In the late afternoon, Tyrion found himself back in his chambers, at last, slumping into a chair. Shae emerged from the adjoining room, face drawn with worry. She rushed to him, running her hands over his arms and shoulders. "My lion," she said, voice quavering. "You're hurt. And you look so tired." He managed a weary smile. "I felt worse," he lied. The ache in his arm persisted, and the mental toll of the night weighed on him. "All that matters is that we survived." She kissed him softly, then pulled back, eyes searching his. "They say the king is dead, that the new king is younger. Does that mean less danger for you?" Tyrion sighed, resting his head against the back of the chair. "I wish. The Game of Thrones never stops. Joffrey's death complicates everything. But for the moment, having Shae close was a small comfort in a world gone mad." He drew her into his arms, letting her presence soothe him. They stayed like that for a time, the daylight waning outside, the city gradually settling. Tyrion's thoughts drifted to the future. The Lannisters now had a child on the throne. The Tyrells would want more influence. Cersei's grief would turn to fury, perhaps directed at Tyrion for failing to save Joffrey or at the world for taking her child from her. Sansa Stark would remain a hostage, but with Joffrey gone, her betrothal was moot. What would become of her now? And what of Stannis, licking his wounds somewhere to the south or on the sea? One thing was certain, Joffrey's death, at the height of the Battle of the Blackwater, had changed the realm irrevocably. Instead of a cruel boy-king forging fear and hate, a gentle boy sat upon the Iron Throne, overshadowed by the Lannisters' might and the Tyrells' ambition. In some ways, it might be a better path. In others, it might plunge the realm into fresh intrigues and turmoil. Even so, Tyrion found a flicker of hope that Tommen's reign could be gentler, that the city might know some semblance of peace if the adults around him chose wisdom over greed. There would be no easy answers. The scars of the siege, the betrayal, and the blood spilled would linger long after the fires died and the rubble was cleared. But for now, Tyrion closed his eyes, letting Shae's warmth envelop him. He had endured the night, survived the battle, and in doing so had witnessed the demise of a king who was never meant for mercy or love. Perhaps, in the end, that was the god's judgment on Joffrey Baratheon. When Tyrion finally reopened his eyes, a pale twilight filled the room. Beyond the shuttered window, he heard a faint cry of a distant watchman calling out the hour. He exhaled slowly, disentangling from Shae's embrace. It was time to return to the swirl of politics that would follow in the aftermath of war. Tomorrow, the city would see the body of Joffrey laid in state. The conspiracies over the cause of his death would begin. Some would suspect the Tyrells or Stannis or perhaps even Tyrion himself. Whispers would flood the taverns, rumors would take root in the alleys. But that was tomorrow's fight. For this one moment, Tyrion allowed himself the simple truth: the Battle of the Blackwater was won and the monstrous Boy King was gone. The Seven Kingdoms stood at a new crossroads. Whether it led to a better future or deeper darkness, only time would tell. He rose from the chair, wincing at the stiffness in his limbs. Shae watched him with worried eyes, but he mustered a small, reassuring smile. Together, they walked to the window, opened the shutters, and looked out over King's Landing. The city's skyline was marred by smoke and the silhouettes of broken towers, but scattered torches glimmered here and there, signs of life persisting. Somewhere in the distance, a mother soothed a crying child. A black cat darted across a ruined ledge. The hush of exhaustion blanketed the streets. Dawn would bring new challenges, yet people still drew breath, hearts still beat, and, for a time, that was enough. Tyrion rested his hand on the windowsill, turning his gaze to the horizon. The setting sun cast hues of orange and red, mingling with the lingering smudge of soot in the sky. "Joffrey's name will pass into history," Tyrion murmured. "We'll see if that name is reviled or celebrated." He glanced at Shae. "But I suspect the realm might find relief in his absence." Shae said nothing, simply placed her hand atop his. They stood in silence, hearts heavy with loss and hope alike, as the city settled into a wary peace. A king had died, another rose in his place, and the storms of war continued. But for tonight, at least, Tyrion Lannister, the imp, was alive, and that had to be enough. He drew in a deep breath, the tang of ash filling his lungs, then exhaled, letting weariness slip free. Tomorrow would be a new day in King's Landing, a city that devoured secrets and spat out bones. But it would be a day without Joffrey Baratheon. And perhaps, though none dared speak it aloud, that alone might spare the realm fresh horrors. Outside, the bells began to toll for the dead king, echoing through the battered streets. The sound washed over the city, a sonorous lament mingled with the distant hush of the waves lapping against the shore. In that solemn ringing, Tyrion thought he heard a promise of change, though whether it was for good or ill, the gods alone could say. He closed the shutters gently, placed his uninjured arm around Shay, and for a fleeting moment allowed himself to believe that better days might lie ahead. Tyrion Lannister rose from his chair the next morning to find the sky shrouded in a gauzy layer of pale white cloud, as though even the heavens wished to hide from what had transpired in King's Landing. The bells had tolled late into the night for Joffrey's passing, and their echoes still seemed to linger in the corridors of the Red Keep. The hush that had fallen over the castle was as tense as a drawn bowstring, punctuated only by the distant scuff of boots on stone or the occasional sob of a traumatized servant remembering the carnage of the battle. He felt the weight of every bruise, every cut, most of all the throbbing ache in his bandaged arm. Sleep had me in fits, chased away by nightmares in which wildfire rose up to burn everything he cared about, or Joffrey's corpse sat upright, arrows still lodged in his throat, accusing eyes turned upon Tyrion. But it was the living Tyrion had to worry about today. When he stepped out of his chambers, Shay was still asleep in his bed. She had insisted on tending him through the night, pressing cool cloths to his brow each time he jolted awake, murmuring soft reassurances when his breath grew ragged with panic. He had finally nodded off just before dawn, lulled by her warmth at his side. Now he had left her with a whispered apology, for duties demanded he attend them. His father would be waiting, along with Mace Tyrell, the lords who had saved King's Landing, and the small council. Joffrey's funeral would require planning, Tommen's crowning needed final confirmations, and the city itself still lay battered from the siege, its people too dazed to even riot, so far. The slightest spark could ignite new chaos. Tyrion intended to do everything in his power to prevent that. He made his way down the corridor, greeted by a stark shift in the usual noise of the castle. Gone was the scuffle of Lannister guards marching in tight rotation, replaced by the presence of Tyrell knights in bright, gold-and-green surcoats. Some saluted him politely. Others stared at him with frank curiosity. He was, after all, the infamous dwarf rumored to be as cunning as a fox and half as trustworthy. Tyrion ignored the stares and offered only curt nods. He was used to such scrutiny. Let them watch. Let them wonder. As long as they did not meddle in his carefully laid plans, he would leave them in peace. Crossing a yard that led to the small council chamber, Tyrion observed the wreckage that even the Red Keep had not escaped. The outer walls of one tower bore long scorch marks from the wildfire blasts, and windows in the older wing had been shattered by the concussions of the night's explosions. Servants shuffled about in grim lines, cleaning gathering twisted bits of metal, piling them in handcarts that squeaked with every jolt of the wheels. The stench of charred wood hung in the air. Swirls of ash drifted on every errant breeze, like pale ghosts set adrift among the living. 2 gold cloaks flanked the doors of the council chamber. They gave Tyrion stiff bows as he passed, though they wore the pinched expressions of men who had seen too much. One had a bandage wrapped around his head, a bloodstain seeping through. Tyrion felt a pang of pity. It was a wonder any of them still stood upright. He nodded, then pushed into the chamber. Inside, he found a cluster of men deep in conversation. Lord Tywin at the center, still in partial armor, with Mace Tyrell looming beside him. Littlefinger, impeccably dressed as always, hovered to the side, wearing an expression of solicitous amusement. Kevan Lannister was also present, leafing through a sheaf of parchment. Grand Maester Pycelle sat near the window, fussing with a pot of tea, while Varys stood by the hearth, hands folded within voluminous sleeves. It was the first time Tyrion had seen them all together since the night's chaos, and for a moment a surreal sense of normalcy washed over him. How many times had he stood in this room, locked in debates over petty matters of coin or rations or trade agreements? Now everything had changed, though the scene looked much the same. Tywin lifted his head at Tyrion's entrance, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're late," he observed in that clipped tone that reminded Tyrion of the scolding he used to endure as a child. "I've been ensuring we still have a city to preside over," Tyrion replied, too drained to mask his sarcasm entirely. "Though it seems you've all started without me." "Come, Lord Tyrion," Mace Tyrell said in his hearty way, stepping forward. The Tyrell patriarch had the look of a man who had thoroughly enjoyed a hearty breakfast already, cheeks rosy, belt straining over his girth. He gave Tyrion a shallow bow. "There is no shortage of tasks ahead. We were merely discussing the funeral for the late King Joffrey. Queen Cersei wishes it to be a magnificent affair, naturally, though it must be arranged swiftly. Tyrion wondered if Cersei truly had her heart set on a lavish ceremony or if she was too numb with grief to care. Nonetheless, he nodded. The people will expect something suitable for a king, he said. But we cannot linger too long. Morale is fragile. A display of the city's grandeur might reassure them, but overdo it and we risk inflaming resentments amid the recent suffering. Quite so, Littlefinger purred. The cost of a grand funeral might be ill-received. On the other hand, a modest ceremony might look like an insult to Joffrey's memory. It's a delicate balance, and our new king, Ahem, may have opinions of his own. At that, Tywin's lip curled in faint distaste. Tommen is a boy. He will speak only the words we instruct him to say, at least for now. He turned a calculating eye on Tyrion. His coronation must follow quickly, or the realm will remain uncertain. We shall bury Joffrey today or tomorrow, and within a fortnight crown Tommen officially. The Tyrells and their bannermen can remain for the ceremony, showcasing a united front for any who might oppose us. Mace Tyrell gave a grave nod. We are at your disposal, my lord. House Tyrell stands with the crown. A ripple of satisfaction crossed his face, though he then pressed his lips together in a show of solemn sympathy. We grieve for the boy too, of course. Tyrion noticed how carefully Mace avoided calling Joffrey by name. Perhaps the Tyrell lord was relieved that his daughter, Marjorie, had been spared marriage to that cruel child king. But House Tyrell would never admit such a thing openly. So Tyrion merely forced a polite smile. The queen may have her own preferences, he said. I'll speak with her and make the necessary arrangements. In the meantime, we have a city to feed, a harbor full of half-sunken ships to clear, and an army of refugees in the streets. Grand ceremonies will do us little good if the people starve. That matter falls to you, Lord Tyrion, Tywin said curtly. You have proven yourself adept at provisioning the city. The Master of Coin's duties remain undone, as Baelish has other tasks to oversee. You will see to distributing supplies and ensuring the gold cloaks keep order. If there's any trouble from the mobs, quell it swiftly. The presence of our Tyrell allies will help maintain order, but let it not devolve into heavy-handed oppression. We need the people, especially now. Tyrion flicked a glance at Littlefinger. Peter Baelish offered a thin, knowing smile but said nothing. Tyrion knew that Baelish was likely wrangling with the notion that his old seat as Master of Coin might be overshadowed by Tywin's new directives. But for the moment, Tyrion did not care to pick that fight. Very well, Tyrion replied, turning to Kevin. Uncle, will you coordinate with the Tyrell Knights to patrol the streets? I'll dispatch the gold cloaks to key areas near Flea Bottom and we'll set up bread lines. The small folk will be hungry, frightened, and prone to quick tempers. Kevin inclined his head. As you wish. We'll see them stationed in pairs, Lannister and Tyrell together, so the people see both houses defending the peace. Mace Tyrell brightened at that. A fine suggestion. My knights stand ready. Let us bring a swift sense of calm to the city. Tyrion's mind churned with the details that needed attention, reopening trade routes, checking on the granaries, paying the gold cloaks wages so they didn't mutiny for lack of coin. And overshadowing it all was the knowledge that Cersei was likely in her rooms half-mad with grief and might lash out at him or anyone else who came near. He braced himself for the confrontation but knew it could not be avoided. As the meeting wound down, Tywin turned to the cluster of lords with measured finality. Then we are agreed, Joffrey's funeral shall be solemn and dignified but not ostentatious. The Queen may add her personal touches. Once that is concluded, we focus all efforts on stabilizing the city. In a fortnight, we stage Tommen's formal coronation. By then, the realm will see that House Lannister and House Tyrell stand united. A wise course, Varys chimed in, smiling amiably. The people will take heart if we show them Tommen is a kinder, gentler king. Tyrion studied Varys, noting the hint of irony in his voice. So, the spider saw the advantage in Tommen's nature as well. Joffrey had ruled through terror and cruelty. Tommen might offer the realm a chance to breathe again if only the powerful lords allowed him to do so. When the council disbanded, Tyrion was the last to leave aside from Varys, who glided up beside him. My lord, Varys said in a hushed tone, the queen is with the body. She's refused all servants except Ser Boros and Ser Marin. Be gentle in your approach. Her grief is, by all accounts, quite raw. Tyrion pressed his lips together. Thank you for the warning. He paused, trying to read Varys's expression. Any rumors stirring among the people? The official story is that Joffrey perished by an enemy arrow in the thick of the siege. The eunuch inclined his head. That is the tale told, yes. The small folk whisper that perhaps it was a punishment from the gods or that Stannis' Red Priestess cursed him from afar. Some say it was you who orchestrated his downfall to seize power. Others claim the Tyrells planted archers with special instructions to rid themselves of a cruel bridegroom. The rumors are manifold. Varys gave a small shrug, a sorrowful note weaving into his voice. Men will talk. But it seems your efforts to feed the city have already endeared you more to the populace than the Boy King ever did. In that sense, the city does not weep for Joffrey. His mother's tears may be the only genuine ones he receives. Tyrion frowned, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and relief. That the city was not plunging into a riot over Joffrey's demise might be a blessing. But it did not erase the pain of a mother who had lost her child, and that mother was now the queen. Let them whisper what they will, Tyrion said quietly. I only hope none of those rumors catch too strong a foothold. We can't afford a vengeful queen demanding retribution from half the court. She'd tear us all apart. Varys' smile was thin as a blade. Indeed. Good luck, my lord. Tyrion exited the chamber and made his way toward the royal sept, where he suspected they had laid out Joffrey's body in a private prayer vigil. He passed more Tyrell bannermen who remained polite but watchful. The halls were dim, clouds had gathered outside, dimming the sunlight that tried to filter through the windows. Faintly, he heard a soft voice singing a dirge, echoing through the corridors with an eerie sorrow. He followed that sound, stepping with care. Soon enough, he reached a side passage that led to the small sept chamber. 2 Kingsguards stood outside with stoic faces, their white cloaks stiff with dried blood. It took Tyrion a moment to identify them as Ser Boros Blunt and Ser Marantran. Both men looked utterly spent, as though they'd aged a decade overnight. Their gazes flicked toward Tyrion, and Ser Boros shifted his stance uncertainly. I wish to see the queen, Tyrion said, voice kept low. Ser Boros started to protest, but Ser Marin intervened. She gave orders not to be disturbed. He hesitated. But you are her brother. Perhaps she'll see you. You can at least give her my name, Tyrion said. If she refuses, so be it. But I must try. Ser Boros vanished inside, closing the door with a hollow thud. Tyrion waited, nerves twisted. He wondered if Cersei would rail at him, blame him, or perhaps even strike him in her rage. He steeled himself for any eventuality. Then the door creaked open once more, and Boros beckoned Tyrion in. He moved carefully, aware of how each footstep seemed to reverberate in the hush. Within, the room was cloaked in shadows. A few candles flickered, their flames dancing across polished marble floors. The sept had been cleared of all but a single crystal altar, before which lay Joffrey's body on a slab draped in crimson cloth. Cersei knelt beside him, her slender shoulders rigid, her hair falling in tangled waves around her face. Tyrion swallowed. In the candlelight, Joffrey's pale features looked almost peaceful, but the faint bruise around his throat told the truth. An arrow's swift cruelty had ended his life. Someone had removed the arrow, but a dark stain remained on the cloth beneath him. Cersei did not look up as Tyrion approached. He halted a few paces away, uncertain how to proceed. She wore a black gown embroidered with gold Lannister lions, the same gown she might have chosen for a funeral had she more time to prepare. The silence stretched. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, as if the sky itself was unsettled. Sister, Tyrion said softly, hating how inadequate the word sounded. She lifted her head, eyes ringed with sleeplessness, raw and red from tears. The lines of her face were etched in fury, in heartbreak. I told them I did not wish to see you, she said, voice ragged. Yet here you are. Tyrion drew a breath. I only came to offer comfort and to ask your wishes for the funeral rites. Comfort. She let out a bitter laugh that turned into something like a sob. What comfort can you give me? My boy's gone, Tyrion. Gone. Why did the gods take him instead of you? The words lanced him, though he had expected as much. I cannot answer for the gods, he murmured. Nor can I bring him back. I can only do my duty to the realm, and that includes ensuring his memory is honored. She stared at him with such hatred it was almost tangible. Yes, the realm. You always hide behind your sense of duty or your cunning. You think I don't know what people whisper? That you despised him, that you might have been relieved when that arrow found his throat. Tyrion tried not to flinch. He was my nephew, regardless of what stood between us. I never wanted this. Neither you nor I can change what happened on the walls. She rose unsteadily to her feet, turning to face him fully. Her grief radiated off her like heat from a forge. He died because he wanted to defend his city. A king doing what a king must. And you, she lifted a trembling hand as if to strike him, then let it fall, tears spilling again. You were always so certain he should stay away from the battle, hidden and safe. You always tried to keep him out of sight, as if you wanted him gone. Tyrion swallowed the lump in his throat. I wanted him protected. Because he was the king. And your son. I knew how dangerous that battlement would be. I begged him not to go. But Joffrey made his choice. She stared at the body again, face crumpling. I should have locked him in his chambers, she whispered. I should have forced him to stay. I failed him. No one could have stopped him that night, Tyrion said softly. You know how stubborn he was. She let out a keening sound, turning away. In that moment, Tyrion's anger toward her cracked. Beneath all the cruelty and cunning, she was a mother who had lost her child. No matter how monstrous Joffrey had been, her grief was real. Tyrion tentatively reached out, resting a hand on her arm. To his surprise, she did not jerk away. Listen to me, Tyrion said, voice low. You have Tommen now. He needs you, desperately. If you retreat into this grief, others will shape him into whatever they desire. Tommen could be a good king, he might bring peace. But he needs his mother's strength and guidance to survive the court's intrigues. She stayed silent, tears streaking her cheeks. Then, very slowly, she turned to meet Tyrion's gaze. I will not fail Tommen, she said, steel creeping into her tone. I will not let anyone harm him or use him. Not father, not you, not the Tyrells, not Baelish. No one. She clenched her fists. If my sweet boy Joffrey had to die for me to see the truth, then so be it. I will not lose Tommen. Tyrion suppressed a sigh. She was turning her grief into defiance, forging it into a blade she would wield against all perceived enemies. Part of him was relieved that at least she would remain functional. Another part of him dreaded the battles ahead. Then help me plan Joffrey's funeral so we can lay him to rest with dignity. After that, we must announce Tommen to the realm as their rightful king. We'll keep him safe, I promise. She studied him with narrowed eyes, searching for some sign of treachery. At length, she gave a shaky nod. Very well. The funeral will be tomorrow in the great September of Baelor. Let it be grand so the realm knows we honor him. Then afterward, her voice trailed off. Tommen will ascend, Tyrion finished for her. And the city will know we still have a ruler. She stepped closer to Joffrey's body, resting a trembling hand on the cloth covering his chest. I will see to the details. You may handle the rest. He had no doubt that the details meant ensuring Joffrey was dressed in resplendent finery, that golden lions draped every corner of the sept, that singers performed the saddest dirges. Tyrion did not argue. The real challenge was ensuring that in the midst of this, the city did not starve or tear itself apart. Very well, he said. I'll leave you to your grief. If you need anything, just leave, she rasped, still staring at Joffrey's face. He withdrew, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. At the door, he glanced back once more. She was leaning over her dead son, tears slipping down her cheeks, lips moving in a broken whisper. Tyrion's heart clenched. Whatever else she was, his enemy, his sister, a merciless queen, she was a mother in mourning. He left quietly, feeling no triumph in her sorrow. Outside, the thunder rumbled again, and a light drizzle had begun to fall. Tyrion turned his face upward, letting the soft rain spatter his cheeks. It was a cold relief after the stifling gloom of the September. He rolled his shoulders, took a steadying breath, and continued on. There was much to do if they were to bury Joffrey with pomp the next day. And after that, the real work would begin. He found Ser Jacelyn Bywater, commander of the city watch, and arranged for the gold cloaks to distribute bread and barley in the markets. Grain stores would be opened under heavy guard. The people needed to see that their new king cared about them. Meanwhile, the Tyrell Knights would set up stations at major intersections to keep order. Houses that had been damaged in the fighting would be given what assistance they could, though resources were limited. Tyrion fought with the ledgers and records to see who might be reimbursed for damages, or at least who might receive a measure of coin to rebuild. Amid all this, he remembered that Mace Tyrell had demanded a separate audience later to discuss the special matter of Margaery's betrothal. Tyrion wondered if Cersei had even been told yet that Margaery would soon be matched to Tommen. He suspected not and dreaded the day she learned of it. The city, at least, responded with hesitant gratitude as gold cloaks guided them to bread lines as Tyrell Knights helped quell the occasional outbreak of looting. The small folk were exhausted from the siege. Many had lost family or friends. For a time, fear and sorrow proved stronger than any rebellious impulse. Tyrion watched carefully for signs of unrest, but that day passed with only minor scuffles. Rain continued to fall off and on, washing some of the ash and grime from the streets. By evening, the city was quieter than it had been in many moons, grieving, perhaps, or simply too drained to riot. That night, Tyrion dined alone in his chambers on a simple meal of wine, bread, and cold slices of meat. He had invited Shae to join him, but she had politely refused, saying she would keep out of sight for a while as the castle was thick with Tyrell eyes and suspicious glances. Tyrion knew she was right. He needed no further complications with the lords who might consider her presence improper. He was finishing his meal when a quiet knock came at the door. He padded over, expecting perhaps Podrick or a guard. But when he opened it, he found Sansa Stark standing there, dressed in a somber gray gown, her auburn hair pulled back from her face. She looked pale and uncertain, her eyes flickering with apprehension. "My lady," Tyrion said, taken aback. She gave a curtsy, her voice soft. "My lord, may I come in?" He stepped aside. "Of course." Once she was in, he closed the door and turned to face her, noticing how she twisted her hands together. "Are you well?" Sansa lowered her gaze. "As well as I can be after everything." She paused, breathing out shakily. "I heard about King Joffrey's funeral tomorrow. I wish to speak with you to learn if I'm expected to attend." Tyrion studied her for a moment. She had been betrothed to Joffrey once, forced to endure his cruelty. Now that he was gone, she must have a whirlwind of feelings. Relief, fear, confusion. "That depends on whether you wish to attend," Tyrion said gently. "No one will force you. Your presence might be expected in the sense that you're still a ward here, but with Joffrey gone, you owe him no final courtesy. If you prefer to remain away from the ceremony, I doubt anyone will question it." She swallowed, eyes downcast. I think I should pay my respects, if only so no one suspects me of rejoicing in his death. People talk, and I don't want them to say I was glad." Tyrion moved closer, voice low with sympathy. "Were you glad, Sansa?" A flicker of conflict flashed in her eyes. "He was cruel," she whispered. "I hated him for what he did to my father and to me. But I was taught not to speak ill of the dead. And I never truly wished his death, only that he'd let me go or that someone would intervene. Now he's gone, and I feel guilty. For the times I secretly hoped he might suffer as I did." Tyrion hesitated, remembering the boy Joffrey with his sadistic grin and petty humiliations. He could not blame Sansa for her relief, but nor could he dismiss her guilt. "That is natural," he said softly. "Death is a heavy thing, especially when it comes so violently. You can pay your respects tomorrow, stand at the back if you wish. No one will think the worse of you. And after that we all move on." She nodded, face drawn. "Thank you. Also, I wanted to ask if there is any news of my family. I heard rumors that my brother, King Robb, was fighting battles in the Riverlands, but I don't know any details." Tyrion sighed. "I only know that he remains in the field. The war continues, though the Lannister armies have forced him into a defensive posture. With the victory here at King's Landing, it's likely my father will turn his attention back to Robb. But for now, the main threat was Stannis." He hesitated. "I'm sorry, my lady, that I cannot bring you better tidings. War rarely yields good news." Sansa's lips pressed into a thin line. "I understand." She paused, gathering her composure. "If there is anything I can do to help or to keep the peace, I'd be willing. I don't want more people to die." Tyrion was struck by her earnestness. For all she had suffered, she still possessed a gentle heart. "You might help by remaining a symbol of unity here," he said. "The Lannisters still hold you as a hostage, but the truth is, your presence discourages the more zealous among my family from seeking your brother's blood. There's no immediate talk of wedding you to Tommen, if that is your fear. The Tyrell alliance changes matters." He tried to give a reassuring smile. "So for now, simply endure, as you always have. Perhaps in time, we'll find a path that leads to your freedom." A trembling hope lit her eyes. She curtsied. "Thank you, my lord. I shall do as you suggest." She left then, silent as a ghost. Tyrion sighed and sank back into his chair, letting the weariness wash over him. The city, the realm, the war, everything was in flux. Joffrey's death had shattered one future, leaving them all scrambling to shape a new one. When morning came, it dawned grim and gray, the clouds layered thick across the sky. A chill wind swept in from the sea. King's Landing's bells resumed their mournful toll, announcing to all that the king's funeral would be held in the great September of Baelor at midday. Tyrion spent the early hours directing last-minute arrangements, ensuring the streets leading to the sept were lined with gold cloaks to keep the crowds at bay. He accompanied Tommen as well, helping the boy dress in black velvet, a small golden crown nestled carefully atop his blonde curls. Tommen's hands shook throughout the process, but Tyrion did his best to calm him, promising he would not be alone. Cersei arrived soon after, eyes rimmed in red, her face pinched with the determination of someone pushing past heartbreak to fulfill a final duty. She fussed over Tommen's collar, ensuring every fold lay perfectly. She said not a word to Tyrion, and he did not press her. Shortly before midday, the royal party made its way through the Red Keep's gates. A black drape had been hung from the walls, fluttering in the breeze. Soldiers stood at attention, their armor polished but their faces haggard from the siege. The Tyrell contingent joined the procession, Mace Tyrell, his son Loras, still wearing a bandage on his arm from the battle, and Marjorie Tyrell, clad in a flowing gown of deep green with gold trim, an expression of somber dignity on her face. Behind them came lords great and small, those who had survived the night of wildfire and sword. A gilded litter bore Joffrey's coffin, flanked by the king guard. The coffin was carved with lions' heads and draped in crimson cloth embroidered with roaring gold lions. The cloying smell of funeral herbs drifted in the air, mingling with the odor of damp stone. The somber toll of bells underscored every footstep as if the city itself was groaning with sorrow or relief. Onlookers crowded along the route, held back by lines of gold cloaks. Some knelt, others simply stared. A few voices murmured half-hearted condolences. Tyrion noted that the city's reaction remained subdued. Joffrey had been neither loved nor admired, and the siege's destruction weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Still, no open jeering or celebration tainted the procession. Fear and fatigue kept their tongues in check. They reached the Great September of Baelor, a massive edifice with 7 crystal towers rising into the dull sky. The doors stood open, revealing a cavernous interior lit by hundreds of candles. Inside, the High Septon and his attendants awaited, clad in formal robes of white and gold. They had prepared the sept for mourning, black draperies over the statues of the 7, soft dirges echoing off the stone arches. The coffin was carried to the center of the sept, placed upon a raised platform strewn with flowers, white roses from House Tyrell's hothouses and red ones from the crown's own gardens. Tyrion spotted Margaery Tyrell's expression as she took in the display. She looked genuinely sad, though he suspected her relief ran deeper. Sansa Stark was near the rear, accompanied by a pair of Lannister guards. She kept her head bowed, her face unreadable. Cersei stood at the coffin's head, Tommen beside her. She gripped his hand. Tyrion hovered a short distance away, with Tywin to his left. The High Septon began the prayers for the dead, chanting in a wavering voice that reverberated in the vast space. Servants lit more candles. The flickering glow reflected in the polished marble floor, dancing across the faces of the assemblage. The air smelled thick with incense, which did little to mask the underlying odor of stale sweat from so many bodies crowded together. At one point, the High Septon beckoned Cersei forward. She approached, placing a golden lion pendant atop the coffin as a symbol of House Lannister's grief. Tommen's lower lip trembled as he followed suit, adding a small golden crown. He turned to look at his mother for guidance. Cersei whispered something in his ear, and the boy nodded. Then, in a trembling voice that carried through the hush, he said, "My brother was the king. He defended King's Landing with his life. I vow to continue his legacy, to protect the realm and honor his memory." Tyrion closed his eyes for a moment, knowing how empty those words must sound to many who had suffered under Joffrey. But for Tommen's sake, they had to maintain the pretense that Joffrey had been a gallant defender. Tommen's vow was more about reassuring the people that he would not abandon them. Still, the whole affair felt painfully hollow. The ceremony continued. The High Septon led the final recitations, calling upon the mother to receive Joffrey's soul, the father to judge him fairly, the warrior to honor his bravery, and so on. Tyrion almost expected a bolt of lightning to strike the boy's coffin for the hypocrisy of it all, but the thunder outside remained a distant growl. When the chanting concluded, the sept fell silent. All eyes turned to the royal family. Cersei bowed her head, tears sliding down her cheeks, and Tommen looked at his dead brother's coffin one last time. Then the queen gestured for the attendants to carry the coffin to the inner sanctum, where it would lie until interred in the royal crypts. The heavy wooden box was lifted, the combined strength of 4 strong men barely enough to move it smoothly. The watchers parted to let them pass. After a final series of blessings, the funeral was ended. The crowd began to disperse, hushed and subdued, as though a single loud noise might shatter the fragile calm. Outside, the bells tolled once more, carrying Joffrey's spirit to the afterlife, or so the lore said. Tyrion did not believe the afterlife would treat that cruel boy kindly, but it was no longer his concern. He stepped outside onto the sept's grand plaza. The wind tousled his hair, the faint drizzle brushing his face. He felt hollowed out, as though he had spent the last scraps of energy sustaining the necessary rituals. He wondered if Cersei felt any relief now that the funeral was done. He doubted it. Grief would linger within her, fueling her anger, her thirst to protect Tommen. Tyrion glanced around, noticing how the gathering of lords and ladies lingered in uneasy clusters. Most seemed unsure how to proceed, for they stood in that limbo between the old king's final farewell and the new king's ascension. Then Margaery Tyrell walked to Tommen and Cersei, offering her condolences with the softest of voices. Tyrion edged closer, curious to see how Cersei would react. The queen's eyes hardened at the sight of the young woman who had been meant to marry Joffrey. But Margaery's gentle tone and downcast lashes gave little room for open hostility. "My queen, your loss is immeasurable," Margaery said, curtsying deeply. My heart breaks for the realm and for you. If there is anything I can do to ease your burden, I stand ready. Cersei's lips tightened, though she managed a curt nod. House Tyrell has done enough already, saving the city, she said. We are grateful. Marjorie's gaze flickered to Tommen, then back to Cersei. We are all one family now, are we not? The Tyrells and Lannisters stand side by side for the sake of the realm. Cersei's eyes narrowed as though she suspected a hidden barb. Yes, she said. One family. It sounded like a threat more than a pledge of unity. Tommen stood uncertainly between them, glancing from one to the other. Tyrion stepped away, not wishing to fan the flames. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Elsewhere, Mace Tyrell was already speaking to Tywin, likely pressing him to finalize the betrothal of Marjorie to Tommen. Tyrion suspected that soon enough, the official announcement would be made. He wondered how Cersei would endure it, losing one son and watching another be matched to a powerful southern heiress who might influence him in ways Cersei could not. The realm's politics were in motion again, a new set of alliances forming around the shape of a child king. Tyrion drifted from the crowd, letting others handle the post-funeral small talk. His head pounded, and the drizzle had become a steady rain that threatened to soak through his cloak. A guard offered him a hooded mantle, which he accepted gratefully. Then he slipped down a side street, away from the main throng, heading back toward the Red Keep. The thought of returning to those stone corridors felt stifling, but he had nowhere else to go. The city seemed subdued under the gray sky, but at least the presence of Tyrell knights and gold cloaks kept order. Small groups of peasants huddled under eaves for shelter, some offering murmured prayers for the dead king, others simply gazing with hollow eyes at the passing lords. Tyrion's boots splashed in puddles. He paused at one intersection to help a woman who had fallen in the mud, offering a hand to pull her to her feet. She gaped at him, clearly recognizing him as the dwarf Lannister, the imp. He patted her shoulder awkwardly. Go on, now, he said, feeling strange. You'll be all right? She merely bobbed her head in gratitude and hurried away. Tyrion pressed on. The path leading back to the Red Keep climbed a gentle slope, giving him a partial view of the battered city. Columns of smoke rose from burnt-out buildings, but far fewer than on the day after the battle. The living were slowly reclaiming the streets. Tyrion wondered if in time King's Landing could truly find peace under Tommen's gentle rule, or if ambition, revenge, and war would tear it all apart again. When he finally reached the castle gates, he found Tywin and Kevan dismounting from their horses. They must have left the sept earlier by a different route. Both men looked pensive. Tywin shot Tyrion a glance as he handed the reins to a stable boy. It's done, Tywin said. The funeral was adequate. Now we must look ahead. Tyrion rubbed rain from his brow. To Tommen's coronation, I suppose. Yes, Tywin said. But also to the war. Robb Stark still holds the north and parts of the Riverlands. Balon Greyjoy raids our coasts. Stannis may have fled, but he's not defeated. We must strengthen our alliances. The Tyrells will wed Marjorie to Tommen. That is non-negotiable. His eyes flicked across Tyrion's face. Your sister may resist, but in time she will see reason or be forced to it. Tyrion gave a short nod. She's fragile right now. Try not to provoke her too openly or you risk driving her into rash acts. She's protective of Tommen. Tywin's face remained unmoved. I will handle Cersei. Meanwhile, I'll have you remain master of coin in all but name until I say otherwise. Baelish has other tasks to do. See that the city's finances don't collapse under the strain of rebuilding. We also need to pay the gold cloaks and the knights who fought for us. A coin withheld is a sword turned inward. Do you understand? I do, Tyrion replied, resisting the urge to point out that the coffers were dangerously low. It will require some cunning to juggle the debts. Then juggle, Tywin said coldly. We will not default on the Iron Bank. We cannot afford to lose their favor. With that he turned away, beckoning Kevan to follow. Together, they headed for the keep's interior, leaving Tyrion standing in the rain. He sighed, adjusting the mantle around his shoulders. Once again, the weight of the city's future pressed on him. He trudged inside, passing through hallways lit by torch sconce. A gloom seemed to settle on him, as if the very stones wept for the memory of endless nights of suffering. The hallway leading to his chambers felt interminable, his legs leaden with exhaustion. Arriving at his door, he discovered Shay inside, stoking the fire. She turned, her brown eyes lighting with concern when she saw his drenched cloak and weary expression. You're soaked, she said softly, crossing to him, helping him remove his mantle. Come sit by the fire. He let her fuss over him, guiding him to the chair. The warmth of the flames felt like a small mercy. He gazed at her face, and for a moment the ache in his chest lessened. I'm all right, he said gently. Just tired. We laid Joffrey to rest today. She knelt by his chair, running a hand along his bandaged arm. "You're hurting. I can see it in your eyes. Is it your wound?" He shook his head. "The wound is healing. It's the city, the war, my family, all of it. I don't know if I can hold it together." "You will," she said firmly. "I've seen you in the worst of times and you always find a way." He gave a weary half-smile. "Then let's hope I still have enough wit left for what's coming. The realm is not done testing me yet." He let her rest her head against his knee, the comforting contact reminding him that he was not entirely alone. The sound of the fire crackling and the patter of rain against the windows lulled him into a momentary sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring new trials. For now, he allowed himself the solace of a quiet chamber, a warm hearth, and the presence of a woman who at least pretended to care for him. The next morning, the bells were quiet, the city rousing itself from the weight of mourning. People went about their business as best they could, though the scars of siege remained. Tyrion convened a meeting in the Tower of the Hand, intending to discuss the city's finances with the relevant officials. He had stacks of parchment, ledgers from which to glean any hidden pockets of coin that might have been overlooked. When he arrived, he was surprised to find Peter Baelish already there, leaning against a table, flipping idly through documents. "Lord Tyrion," Baelish greeted, that sly smile never far from his lips. "You're an early riser." "I might say the same of you," Tyrion replied, crossing the room to set his parchments down. "I assumed you'd be busy reacquainting yourself with your other ventures." Baelish offered a small bow. "Oh, I've many irons in the fire. But I prefer not to neglect the matters of coin, especially when Lord Tywin might reassign tasks at any moment." He lifted a ledger, flipping its pages. "I see here that some of our grain shipments were seized by outlaws a fortnight past. Troublesome. And the city's tax revenue has dipped drastically during the siege." Tyrion stifled a sigh. "Yes, and we need to find ways to replenish the coffers while not squeezing the people too hard. They've already suffered enough. If we impose heavy new taxes, it might spark riots." Baelish set the ledger aside and shrugged. "Such is the eternal problem of governance, how to spend coin we do not have, on matters we cannot ignore, without provoking a revolt." Tyrion eyed him. "You sound almost cheerful at the prospect." Baelish's expression revealed nothing beyond mild amusement. "Merely stating a fact, my lord. I'm sure you'll find a solution. You have a talent for improvisation. If you ever require my counsel, I remain eager to assist. And perhaps, in time, you might speak to Lord Tywin on my behalf, should I wish to travel again. The Vale calls to me." Tyrion arched a brow. "The Vale? Have you not had your fill of meddling in other regions?" Baelish smiled, unperturbed. "One can never have too many friends or too many opportunities. The Eyrie is vulnerable without Lord Aaron or Lady Lisa's stable RUL. I might be of some help there. But that's a matter for another day." He pushed away from the table with an elegant flourish and swept out of the chamber, leaving Tyrion with the ledgers and the faint sense that Baelish was forever weaving some intricate tapestry of his own design. Tyrion sat down with the parchments, running a hand across his face. The day's hours stretched before him, stuffed with figures, obligations, and the constant worry that another crisis would erupt. By midday, he had hammered out a preliminary plan: request a modest loan from the Tyrells themselves, levied as part of their devotion to the new king, matched by a slight increase in port tariffs on incoming ships. With the harbor still partially blocked, shipping was reduced, but once cleared, trade might resume quickly. A few small taxes on luxury goods might also help. It was all a delicate dance, but he hoped to do it without alienating the small folk. He decided to present the plan to Lord Tywin and Mace Tyrell at the next small council meeting. Shortly after midday, he left the Tower of the Hand to inspect the harbor personally. The day was cold and overcast, but at least the rain had ceased. He took a litter down to the waterfront, accompanied by a retinue of guards. The streets were muddy, still bearing the scars of catapult fire and collapsed structures. Yet the mood among the small folk seemed marginally improved. No immediate threat loomed at the gates, the Boy King was rumored to be gentle, and soldiers passed out bread every morning and evening. After the terror of the siege, even a faint sense of normalcy felt like a blessing. Down at the harbor, the smell of rotting wood and brine mingled with the acrid tang of burnt pitch. Broken hulks of ships littered the shallows, left from when the wildfire erupted among Stannis's fleet. Crews of workers were laboring to salvage what they could, hauling debris ashore, sorting through battered crates for anything of value. The ghostly green residue of wildfire still stained some wreckage, glowing faintly in shady corners. The sight made Tyrion's stomach churn. He recalled the monstrous roar of that explosion all too clearly, the way the sky had gone bright green in an instant, the screams of men engulfed in dragon-like flame. He oversaw a discussion with the harbor master who assured him that with enough hands, they could clear the shipping lanes within a week or two, allowing vessels to dock more safely. Tyrion promised payment for the workers, though the harbor master's eyes flickered with skepticism as if he knew the city's coin might be thin. Even so, the man bowed low, giving thanks for the dwarf lord's attention. As Tyrion strolled along the waterfront, he noticed the battered walls that faced the bay. Large sections had been scorched, the stone blackened by the wildfire's fury. Men dangled from ropes as they repaired cracks, hammered in new supports, or replaced shattered battlements. The clang of hammers, the shouts of foremen, and the creak of pulleys blended with the waves lapping on the shore. It was a discordant symphony, but at least it signaled progress. Tyrion found it strangely calming to watch honest labor rebuilding what war had torn down. Nearby, a group of peasants gathered around a makeshift shrine, lighting candles for the dead. Tyrion heard them murmur the names of family members lost in the fires or killed by arrows. Some spoke of King Joffrey's funeral as if it were a footnote, one more death in a city that had known too many. Tyrion paused, head bowed in silent respect. The realm's power struggles always weighed heaviest on the innocent. Now that Joffrey was gone, he prayed things might improve, if only a little. He stayed at the harbor until the sun began to sink, a pale orange disk behind the clouds. Then he returned to the Red Keep where fresh matters awaited. A servant informed him that a small council meeting had been called. Tyrion made haste, ignoring his growling stomach. In the council chamber he found Tywin, Mace Tyrell, Kevan, Varys, and Pycelle already assembled. Cersei was absent, presumably with Tommen or perhaps sequestered in her chambers. They spoke first of the realm's military situation. Tywin reported that the remnants of Stannis' forces had scattered, though the self-proclaimed king was rumored to be on Dragonstone once more. The crown's next priority would be securing the Riverlands and ensuring that Robb Stark did not take advantage of the lull at King's Landing. Tyrion listened with half an ear, thinking back to Sansa Stark's anxious question about her family's fate. He kept silent, though. He had little influence over how Tywin chose to conduct the war against the North. Next, they discussed the official betrothal of Margaery Tyrell to Tommen. Mace Tyrell was visibly eager to finalize the arrangement, bobbing his head enthusiastically. "My daughter is deeply grieved by the loss of King Joffrey," he said, voice echoing with self-important sincerity, "but she stands ready to fulfill her duty to the realm, to unite our houses, and to guide King Tommen with a gentle hand." Tywin nodded curtly. "Then let the formal announcement be made in 2 days' time. The wedding itself we can plan for when Tommen is a bit older. In the meantime, Margaery shall remain here at court near Tommen to foster a bond." Tyrion glanced at Mace, who looked pleased as a man who just devoured a full roast. The arrangement gave the Tyrells a direct line to the throne and the Lannisters a powerful ally. So long as that alliance endured, neither side had reason to break it. Tyrion dreaded what Cersei would say or do when told of the official announcement date, but that was a matter for Tywin to handle. Tyrion would keep out of it if he could. Finally, the talk turned to finances. Tyrion laid out his plan for mild port tariffs and a direct request to the Tyrells to underwrite part of the city's reconstruction. Mace Tyrell pursed his lips as though weighing the cost, but Tywin quickly interjected that such generosity would be well remembered by the new king. That sealed it. Mace agreed to a loan at favorable terms, letting the city use the money to rebuild wharves, roads, and pay the watch. Tyrion made careful notes, feeling a tentative relief that at least on paper they would not be bankrupt immediately. When the meeting ended, the hour was late and Tyrion's stomach rumbled audibly. He made his way to the kitchens where the staff had set aside some bread, soup, and a small roast. As he ate, he noticed the subdued hush in the corridors. The castle was still in mourning black for Joffrey, though no one had said how long that would continue. Perhaps until Tommen's coronation. The combined gloom and wariness left everyone walking on eggshells. He was finishing a cup of wine when a page arrived, bowing deeply. "My lord, the queen requests your presence in her solar." Tyrion's pulse quickened. He wiped his mouth on a napkin and followed the page. Cersei had scarcely spoken to him since the funeral. This summons might mean she had steeled herself for some confrontation. At least she was no longer in the sept with Joffrey's body. The boy's remains had been placed in the crypt, sealed away, the final door closed. Perhaps that finality had allowed her a measure of mental clarity. Or perhaps she was simply ready to lash out. He reached her solar, a modest chamber near the south side of the Red Keep, richly furnished but dimly lit. The page opened the door for him, then scurried away. Tyrion stepped in to find Cersei standing by the window, her hair unbound, wearing a dark gown with only minimal gold embroidery. She was gazing out at the city lights below, faint flickers in the gloom, as if she searched for something in the night sky. She did not turn when he entered, so Tyrion waited near the door, uncertain if he should speak first. At length she said, "Close the door." He complied. Silence stretched. A single candle on a side table cast a wavering glow, the flame reflecting in the gold threads of the carpet. Tyrion's heart pounded. "You sent for me, sister?" She exhaled slowly. They planned to announce Margaery's betrothal to Tommen in 2 days. "Did you know?" "Yes," Tyrion replied carefully. "It was decided at council. Father negotiated the final details with Lord Tyrell. It will be official soon." Her shoulders tensed and she turned to face him. By the light of the candle, Tyrion saw the raw anger and fear in her eyes. "I will not lose my second son to some scheming broodmare. The Tyrell girl will not manipulate Tommen as she planned to manipulate Joffrey. I won't allow it." Tyrion spoke gently. "I doubt Margaery has ill intentions, but even if she does, the betrothal is set. With Joffrey gone, we need the Tyrell alliance to secure the realm. The city was saved by their army. We cannot spurn them now." Cersei closed her eyes for a moment as if wrestling with her own reason. "Father has decided, hasn't he?" she said bitterly. "He has always decided everything for me. Where I should marry, what I should do, how to behave. Now he means to do the same with Tommen." Her voice dropped. "I hate it. I hate being powerless." Tyrion felt a pang of unexpected sympathy. "If you want to protect Tommen, you must remain close to him. Show him affection and counsel so he trusts you more than any other. Father will push for Margaery's influence, but you can still be the mother he relies on." She eyed him warily. "You speak as if you want me to succeed." "Why?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Because Tommen is our blood and because he's a good boy. If he's surrounded by fear, or if he's used like a pawn, it won't end well. A puppet king rarely lasts long. The realm needs stability." She studied him for a long moment. "You have changed, Tyrion. Or perhaps I never truly knew you. You want the realm secure, you want Tommen safe. Yet I recall a time when you threatened Joffrey." Tyrion's thoughts flicked to that day in the throne room when Joffrey had tormented Sansa. He had slapped the boy king, threatened to box his ears again if he stepped out of line. "He gave me reason to threaten him," Tyrion said softly. "Tommen is different. I do not hate him." Cersei's gaze dropped to the floor. She pressed her lips together as though struggling with an emotion. Then she looked up and for a moment Tyrion saw a glimmer of sincerity beneath her walls of anger. "I don't know what to believe anymore. But I will do as you say, remain close to Tommen, guide him. I refuse to let Margaery supplant me in his affections." Tyrion nodded, letting out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "That is all I can advise. If it's any solace, Margaery is likely aware that if she pushes you aside, she'll lose the alliance you represent. She's ambitious, but not foolish." Cersei's face hardened again. "I'll be the judge of that." A silence settled, then she went on, voice trembling with a mixture of rage and grief. "I want to see the men who fired those arrows that night. I want to know who was responsible for the one that killed Joffrey." Tyrion felt a chill. "We may never know exactly which archer loosed the fatal shaft," he said cautiously. "It could have been any of Stannis's men." She clenched her jaw. "Then find them all. Hunt them down and make them pay." He swallowed, realizing she was speaking from a place of blind vengeance. "Cersei, the war is still ongoing. We cannot chase every archer in Stannis' service across the 7 kingdoms. And punishing them will not bring Joffrey back." Her voice rose, raw and furious. "I don't care. I want them to suffer for what they took from me. You have spies, resources. I will not rest until we see justice done." Tyrion rubbed at his temple, dread gnawing his gut. "I'll speak to Varys, see if we can learn anything about the specific companies that scaled the walls. But please understand, it may be impossible." She laughed bitterly, a sound full of despair. "Fine. Go on. Give me your pretty words. But if I find them first, you'd best not stand in my way." Her threat hung in the air. Tyrion bowed his head, feeling the gulf between them widen. "I won't." For a moment, her anger dimmed and she looked at him as though seeing him anew. Then, without another word, she turned back to the window, the candlelight reflecting off her hair. Tyrion took his leave quietly, shutting the door behind him with a soft click. In the corridor, he exhaled shakily. Her thirst for vengeance was a live thing, coiled around her grief. That could become dangerous indeed, another spark in a city built of tinder. The days that followed saw the final shift away from mourning and the steady approach of Tommen's official betrothal announcement. The black drapes were removed from the castle walls, replaced with more neutral banners of the crown. The great hall was cleaned, the soot and rubble cleared, and a new dais erected for the official ceremony. Marjorie Tyrell was given a suite of rooms not far from Tommen's, and rumors flew about how she visited him with sweets and little gifts to put him at ease. Tyrion kept busy with logistical work, ensuring that the reparation efforts in the city continued, meeting with the harbor master, paying workers their wages from the newly acquired Tyrell coin. He noticed that gradually a certain relief seemed to settle over the populace, no more brutal king roaming about, punishing them for trifles. Tommen's coronation was rumored to be more promising, especially if Marjorie Tyrell's rumored kindness matched the stories. The gold cloak still patrolled, but the tension eased a fraction every day. It seemed that the city itself was exhaling after so much cruelty. But all was not well beneath the surface. The demands of the war did not abate, and ravens brought grim tidings. Robb Stark still held Riverrun, and House Frey grumbled about broken betrothals and alliances. Balon Greyjoy's longships harried the western coasts. Tywin was ever more pressed to dispatch armies in multiple directions, relying on Kevan's leadership and the Tyrell reinforcements. Tyrion gleaned bits of strategy from passing remarks but kept his head down. War was not his specialty, survival in court was. One evening, as the day of Tommen and Marjorie's betrothal announcement approached, Tyrion found himself summoned to Tywin's private study. It was a rarity that gave him an uneasy twinge. He arrived to see his father at a desk piled with parchments. Tywin waved him to a chair opposite. "I trust the city's finances are stable for the moment?" Tywin asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "As stable as can be expected," Tyrion replied. "The Tyrell loan and our slight increase in tariffs have given us a brief reprieve. We'll need more coin if the war drags on, however." "It will drag on," Tywin said flatly. "And we'll find the coin. For now, I have another task for you." Tyrion raised his brows. "Oh." Tywin leaned forward, folding his hands. "We need to ensure that certain messages are delivered. The Freys are restless. I have no time to humor Walder Frey's demands personally, but we cannot afford to let him slip away to the Starks. I'll need someone cunning to negotiate fresh terms to ensure he remains on our side." Tyrion felt a pang of unease. "You wish me to treat with Walder Frey?" Tywin gave a curt nod. "He respects cunning, or at least he fears it. You have proven capable of both. You'll bring him an offer that ensures he'll stand with us against the Starks. The details can be discussed, but I envision certain marriage pacts, privileges for crossing at the twins, perhaps even a lordship for one of his brood in the future. The man loves bribes, so we'll feed him well." Tyrion exhaled. Traveling into the Riverlands to parley with Walder Frey sounded like a fool's errand, yet if Tywin commanded it, he had little choice. "And if he demands more than we can give?" Tywin's eyes glinted coldly. "Use your wits or lie if you must. Promise him the moon if that's what it takes. We'll sort out the actual terms later." It was an approach that made Tyrion's stomach churn, negotiating in bad faith. But that was the Lannister way, was it not? "Very well. When do I leave?" "Soon after Tommen's betrothal is announced," Tywin said. "You'll need to depart quietly with a small escort so you don't draw attention. Cersei might protest your absence, but I'll handle her. The city will manage without you for a time, so long as your instructions for the gold cloaks and finances are clear." Tyrion nodded, mind racing at the practicalities. "I'll make arrangements." Tywin pursed his lips. "Also, see that you take your squire and a minimal retinue. We can't risk a large host traveling openly. The roads are dangerous and your success depends on slipping through quickly. If you fail, we may lose the Freys altogether, which would complicate matters with House Stark. Is that understood?" "Understood," Tyrion said. He tried to keep any hint of dread from his voice. Negotiating with Walder Frey could be akin to dancing on quicksand. But at least it might spare him from the swirling tensions at King's Landing for a time. "Good," Tywin said. He returned his gaze to the parchments. "You may go." Tyrion left, his thoughts churning. Another journey, another set of deceptions. Perhaps a part of him was relieved to escape the city's claustrophobic politics, especially with Cersei's seething rage. But Walder Frey was hardly a more pleasant option. He recalled Sansa's unwavering hope that the war would end soon, that fewer would die. But deals with men like Walder Frey often led to more bloodshed, not less. Tyrion felt the old cynicism creeping back into his heart. Perhaps all he could do was survive and help the innocent survive along the way, if possible. He decided not to mention this new mission to anyone except Podrick, who would gather supplies for the journey. Shay would have to remain behind, safely hidden. He knew she'd be displeased, but bringing her along into the Riverlands was too risky. The less baggage he carried, the better. The next day, the announcement of Tommen's betrothal to Marjorie Tyrell took place in the throne room. Trumpets sounded weakly, for the court was not in a mood for loud revelry so soon after the siege and Joffrey's funeral. Still, the hall was decked in gold and green banners alongside the royal red and gold, a symbolic union of the two houses. Tommen, in fine velvet with a short red cape, sat upon the iron throne, his feet not quite reaching the floor, while Margaery stood below him, hands folded demurely. Tywin made the formal proclamation, voice echoing in the high-vaulted chamber. Cersei stood by Tommen's side, expression carved from ice. Mace Tyrell beamed like a man who had just purchased half the realm. Applause rippled through the assembly. Tyrion stood in the front row, clapping politely. He glimpsed Sansa a short distance away, accompanied by a guard, her face unreadable. She caught his eye once, then looked away. At the end of the ceremony, the heralds called for blessings on the union, for the health of the new king, and for the swift end to the war. Then it was done. Margaery stepped up to the throne, took Tommen's small hand in hers, and gave a graceful curtsy, murmuring her gratitude for his favor. Tommen blushed deeply, stammering a response. The crowd chuckled softly. Tyrion thought them a strangely sweet pair, a boy undone by a poised young woman. If the realm were kinder, their marriage might become a gentle partnership. But the realm was seldom kind. As the formalities concluded, Tyrion slipped away. He had no desire to be caught in the swirl of empty compliments. Outside the throne room, he encountered Loras Tyrell, who was leaning against a marble pillar. The Knight of Flowers wore a polished breastplate etched with vines and roses, his eyes distant. When he saw Tyrion, he nodded politely but did not smile. A fine ceremony, Tyrion remarked. Loras shrugged. It's what my father wanted. Margaery is good at these things. She'll do her duty. Tyrion studied him. And what about you, Ser Loras? Is your duty to remain at court, or will you ride with the armies? A flicker passed over Loras's handsome face. I remain for now. The Queen Regent has demanded that I serve in the King's Guard to protect her son. His jaw tightened. In Joffrey's place, I suppose. Tyrion understood. Loras had once served Renly Baratheon, and rumors abounded that they had been closer than mere king and sworn sword. Now Loras was bound to guard the new boy king, a future brother-in-law of sorts. You have my sympathies, Tyrion said quietly. That's not an easy vow. Loras inclined his head. Nor is it one I can refuse. He looked past Tyrion to the distant corridor. At least Margaery is safe from Joffrey's cruelty. Tommen seems kind. He is, Tyrion agreed. I hope you find some measure of peace here. The younger man gave a hollow laugh. Peace? I doubt there's much of that in King's Landing. But thank you. He straightened, adjusting the white cloak that hung from one shoulder. If you'll excuse me, I must see to my duties. He walked away, footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Tyrion watched him go, feeling a twist of pity. The city was full of illusions, illusions of union, illusions of peace. Underneath, the wounds of war and personal loss festered. Everyone was simply trying to survive or maneuver for advantage. 2 mornings later, Tyrion prepared for his quiet departure to the Riverlands. He had told Cersei he was traveling to address certain financial matters in the field, which was not entirely a lie. She had not seemed to care, lost as she was in her own private vendettas. He embraced Shae in a hurried farewell, promising to return soon, though he could offer no date. Podrick Payne stood by, anxious but determined to follow his lord. They rode out by a small postern gate, accompanied by a handful of loyal gold cloaks. The city receded behind them, the red walls of the keep fading into the haze of morning light. Tyrion glanced back once, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He felt an odd mixture of dread and relief. For better or worse, he was leaving King's Landing, and behind him, the swirl of intrigue around the new king, the newly betrothed Margaery, and the Queen Mother's simmering rage. As his horse plodded onto the muddy road that led westward, he couldn't help but wonder if the city might change in his absence, or if, when he returned, it would all have collapsed anew under the weight of secrets and ambition. The realm was a vast game board, and every piece kept shifting. He dreaded what new chaos might arise in the Riverlands, in Walder Frey's halls of potential treachery. Still, this was his path. He was Tyrion Lannister, the imp, the half-man, the cunning dwarf who survived every storm so far. With a final glimpse at the horizon, he spurred his horse onward, determined to wrest whatever small measure of peace or justice he could from a world determined to tear itself apart. Days of riding followed, the countryside bearing scars of its own. Villages burned out from raids, fields trampled by passing armies. Tyrion and his retinue skirted the worst trouble spots by taking lesser-known roads, guided in part by half-reliable local guides. Podrick was a quiet companion, performing his duties with a dogged loyalty that Tyrion found endearing, if sometimes exasperating. The gold cloaks grumbled about the rough terrain, but Tyrion insisted on caution. The last thing he wanted was to be captured by brigands or Stark outriders, or worse, run into a roving band of Sellswords who wouldn't care if they carried Lannister colors. On the 5th day, they came upon a small hamlet near a stream. Smoke rose from the chimney of an inn, and the smell of fresh-baked bread coaxed their hungry bellies. Tyrion decided they would stop for the night, preferring a bed to the muddy camp they'd endured the previous evening. The inn was modest. A single large common room, a handful of tiny sleeping quarters upstairs, but it was clean and free of vermin. Tyrion secured a private room for himself, while the gold cloaks and pods spread out in the common area. He spent the evening over a plate of hot stew and a tankard of ale, half listening to the locals' tales of passing armies and uncertain loyalties. Some voiced sympathy for the new boy king, while others grumbled that the wolf in the north might be a better hope. Most simply wanted the wars to end. Tyrion said little, playing the role of a minor Lannister official traveling on business. He doubted any recognized him in the dim lamplight. Later, as he climbed the creaky stairs to his room, he heard a distant rumble of thunder. Rain again, no doubt. He was about to push open the door when he sensed movement behind him. Whirling, he saw Podrick at the top of the stairs, face pale. The squire opened his mouth, but no words came. "What is it, Pod?" Tyrion asked softly, heart suddenly hammering. Pod pressed his lips together. "My lord, there's a man downstairs at the bar. He recognized you, I think." He said something about the imp and started asking the barkeep questions. Tyrion felt a stab of alarm. "Is he alone?" "I think so, but I'm worried he might spread word." Tyrion considered. If he were recognized, any number of foes might be alerted, brigands, Stark sympathizers, or simple opportunists hoping for a ransom. "Stay calm. We'll see if he approaches. I have a private room. If necessary, we'll slip out before dawn." Pod nodded, swallowing. "Yes, my lord." They retreated into the small room, which smelled of musty bedding and candle wax. Tyrion locked the door, then pulled a small knife from his bag, placing it under his pillow. He doubted it would do much good if a larger force came for him, but it was better than nothing. He told Pod to rest, though both their nerves were on edge. Hours passed in tense silence. The storm rolled in, rain pattering on the roof, lightning flashing through the narrow window. Now and then Tyrion heard footsteps outside, but no one tried the door. Sometime after midnight, exhaustion took him, and he dozed fitfully, dreaming of crossbow bolts flying at him from the shadows. He woke at dawn, stiff and bleary-eyed, but mercifully still alive. He and Pod went downstairs to find the common room nearly empty. The man who had supposedly recognized Tyrion was nowhere to be seen. The barkeep shrugged when asked, saying the fellow had left in the night, claiming urgent business. Tyrion's stomach twisted at the thought that the man might be carrying news of his presence to who knew what interested party. Nonetheless, they had to press on. He paid the innkeeper generously to ensure silence, though he doubted it would guarantee anything. The morning ride was somber. The sky remained overcast, threatening more rain. Tyrion felt the hairs on the back of his neck prickle as though someone watched them from afar. Each passing traveler on the road made him wary. The gold cloaks kept their hands near their sword hilts, scanning the brush. But no attack came. By midday, the clouds broke, letting in some wan sunlight. They halted near a stream to water the horses and eat a cold lunch of bread and cheese. As they rested, Pod noticed a faint plume of dust on the horizon. A small group of riders approached, perhaps 5 or 6, traveling at a good pace. Tyrion quickly mounted his horse, instructing the gold cloaks to form up. Tension crackled in the air. When the riders drew nearer, Tyrion's heart hammered. But then he saw they wore the sigil of House Lannister, a golden lion on a crimson field. Leading them was a knight with a narrow face and a trimmed gray beard. He raised a hand in greeting. "Ho there, Lannister men." Tyrion let out a breath. "Yes. We travel on the king's business." "Who are you?" The knight drew closer. "I'm Ser Davin Marbrand, sent from Lord Tywin. We've been riding hard to locate you, my lord." He eyed Tyrion carefully, then bowed in the saddle. "Lord Tyrion, yes? We bring urgent news." Tyrion's mind raced. Had something happened in King's Landing? "I am Tyrion Lannister," he said tersely. "What news?" Ser Davin exchanged a glance with his men, then cleared his throat. "We've word from the Riverlands. King Robb Stark has been defeated. There was a wedding at the Twins. The phrase turned on him. It said Lord Walder betrayed the midfeast, had the Northmen butchered. Robb Stark is dead. Silence fell. Tyrion felt a chill slip down his spine. Robb Stark dead? The Wolf of the North, the young king who had been unstoppable, cut down by treachery at a wedding feast. The wedding, Edmure Tully's wedding, I recall. The phrase must have planned it in secret with father's approval. Ser Davin looked grim. It seems so. We were told to find you and instruct you that dealings with Lord Frey are complete. No need for negotiations. The North is leaderless now. The war may soon be over. Tyrion's stomach churned. So father orchestrated a betrayal behind my back. He told me to negotiate with the phrase. But the matter was already in motion. Ser Davin averted his gaze. I cannot say, my lord. We were only told to convey that your presence is no longer needed in the Riverlands. You may return to King's Landing at once. The matter is settled. Tyrion closed his eyes briefly, remembering Sansa's hopeful questions about her brother, the cause of the North. Now Robb was dead, slaughtered at a wedding under guest right, if the rumors were accurate. The thought of Walder Frey luring them in with feigned hospitality made Tyrion want to retch. No doubt father has his reasons, he said bitterly. Very well, we ride back. And so, not even a week after leaving King's Landing, Tyrion reversed course. They took the same roads, passing the same battered villages. Only now Tyrion felt more hollow than ever. Robb Stark was gone, and with him any chance of a clean peace for the North. The war might end, yes, but at what cost? A butchery of men who had trusted the promise of a wedding feast. Tyrion knew enough to guess that this act of treachery would stain House Frey and House Lannister for years to come. On the road back, he spoke little. Pod tried to offer conversation, but Tyrion waved him off. His thoughts drifted to Sansa. She was, in all likelihood, now truly orphaned of any real family in the South. Her mother presumably dead as well. Catelyn Stark had likely been at the wedding, if the rumors about her presence were true. Sansa might not even know yet. Tyrion dreaded how she would learn of this, how the knowledge would break her fragile composure. The return journey was swift. After a few days, the distant shape of King's Landing came into view, its walls dull under another clouded sky. As they neared the gates, Tyrion couldn't help but notice an increased presence of Tyrell men and Lannister guards. The Watch recognized him at once, letting him in. He parted ways with Ser Davin, who said he would report to Tywin. Tyrion guided his horse through the dirty streets, ignoring the stares of passers-by. The city had changed little in his absence. Still scarred, still stinking, still overcrowded. Yet now the rumor of the Starks' downfall might be spreading. Perhaps the small folk would be relieved, or perhaps they would fear the next act of brutality. At the Red Keep, Tyrion dismounted in the courtyard, leaving Pod to see to the horses. He trudged inside, footsteps echoing on the tiles. A page informed him that Lord Tywin was in a meeting with the small council but would see Tyrion afterward. Tyrion had no wish to wait idly, so he made for his chambers, hoping to find a moment of quiet. He found Shae waiting, her expression lighting up at his return. She embraced him, though her warmth could not chase the chill that clung to his bones. He told her only that his journey had been cut short, but not the details. Later, after the two of them shared a meal, a knock sounded at the door. Tyrion opened it to find a somber-faced guard. Lord Tywin requests your presence in his solar, the man said. Tyrion sighed, feeling the weight settle again. Very well. He donned a fresh cloak and left Shae behind, her worried eyes following him. In Tywin's solar, Tyrion found his father standing before a tall window, gazing over the city. A tray of wine and a single cup sat on a side table. Tywin turned as Tyrion entered, his face as impassive as ever. You've heard the news of the Frey wedding, Tywin said, a statement rather than a question. Tyrion inclined his head. I have. Tywin gestured to the wine, though made no move to pour any for himself. The war with the North is effectively over. The Stark boy is dead, his mother slain, and his bannermen scattered. Walder Frey has done a great service for the realm. Tyrion bristled at that phrase, a great service. So the realm is saved by betrayal, by the slaughter of guests beneath a wedding roof? I trust the singers will have a glorious name for it. Tywin's expression hardened. Spare me your moralizing. Wars are not won by gallant gestures alone. The Starks refused to submit. This was the swiftest way to break them. But a wedding under the oath of guest right, Tyrion shook his head. That will not be forgotten. The phrase will be despised. They are of no consequence, Tywin snapped. What matters is that the North will soon kneel or tear itself apart leaderless. Sansa Stark remains our hostage. This was always the plan, Tyrion. Your negotiations were a ruse to keep you out of the city and to ensure that if the phrase failed, you'd have plausible deniability. Tyrion stared, anger flaring. You used me as a decoy. You never intended me to treat with Walder Frey. Tywin shrugged, unapologetic. You're more valuable here. Now the war's end draws near. We have the Tyrell alliance, the North is broken, Stannis is in retreat, and Balon Greyjoy lacks the strength to hold what he's taken. King's Landing can breathe again. You should thank me. Thank you. Tyrion repeated bitterly. For orchestrating a mass murder and lying to me about it? Tywin's eyes flashed. Take care how you speak, boy. I am your father and the head of this house. I do not require your approval. Tyrion's heart pounded, but he held his ground. You might not need my approval, but you do need me to manage the city. The people will be uneasy hearing tales of the Red Wedding. If they see we are capable of that, they may fear what else we can do. Fear can lead to rebellion. Tywin's jaw tightened. Then do your job and quell it. We have given them bread, safety, and a kind boy king. Let them whisper. The war is nearly done, and we have won. Tyrion closed his eyes briefly, trying to steady his voice. Yes, father. Tywin waved a dismissive hand. Go. Tell your sister the news if she hasn't heard. The next step is to secure our hold on the North through Sansa or other means. I'll see about awarding territory to the Freys or Boltons, whoever helps pacify the region. Now leave me. Tyrion bowed stiffly, turned, and left. Outside in the corridor, he felt an overwhelming urge to scream or break something, but he merely clenched his fists until the anger subsided to a dull ache. House Lannister had won in the most monstrous way possible. And he was complicit by virtue of his name, his blood, and the position he held. He walked slowly to the royal gardens, ignoring the drizzle that had begun again. The fountain trickled in the center, droplets forming concentric ripples in the pool. Tyrion stared at the reflection of the sky, gray and unforgiving. He wondered what Ned Stark would have thought of such a victory. No doubt the honorable lord would have been horrified. And what of Sansa, forced to live among those who orchestrated the murder of her brother? The realm might know peace in name, but the seeds of bitterness and revenge had been sown anew. As he stood there, the water reflecting his troubled features, Tyrion felt the old cynicism press heavily on his heart. Yet he reminded himself that Tommen was king now, a gentle boy who might yet prove to be a better ruler than Joffrey ever was. The Tyrell alliance was strong, which might at least grant stability. For the sake of the common folk, for the sake of children who had known only war, perhaps some good might still come. Even if it was built on a foundation of treachery and blood. Tyrion let out a long breath. He would remain in King's Landing, do what he must to keep the city fed, maintain order, and protect Tommen from the worst influences. If that meant crossing his father in subtle ways or appeasing his sister's wrath, so be it. He was a Lannister of Casterly Rock, but he was also Tyrion, the imp, the half-man who had survived battles, betrayals, and scorn. He would keep surviving and maybe, just maybe, help a few innocents along the way. Thunder rumbled again, echoing over the city. Tyrion turned from the fountain, heading back inside to face whatever fresh intrigues the day would bring. Joffrey was gone, Robb Stark was dead, and the realm's fate rested on fragile alliances and a boy king's uncertain future. In the shadows of the Red Keep, the Game of Thrones continued, and Tyrion Lannister would play his part, cunning, unbowed, and in his own secret way, quietly defiant.